The crown prince's troops retreated, and the crowd rejoiced at the victory of the Duchess of Lupern. They wanted to burn the castle and did not intend to leave anyone alive. They were about to find themselves in the castle, and this caused wild fear. The girl ran along the castle corridor and heard cries for help behind her. But suddenly, the screams died down. Harper Lupern stood frozen in shock. In a few seconds, she was to die at the hands of Callista Lupern, the very woman whose victory had just been proclaimed. He and his sister hadn't seen each other for a long time, although perhaps not that long ago. Harper Lupern was the second daughter of the ducal house of Lupern. They were the richest and most influential family in the empire. Harper was also the fiancé of Crown Prince Klein Wyan, who was nicknamed the incarnation of the empire's founder. On paper, she seemed to have everything, but in reality, her life was a real nightmare. Born the daughter of a servant, she was a thorn in the side of her sister Callista. She tried to get rid of her at every opportunity. The engagement to the prince became salvation from the ill-fated sister. But he never loved her and only wanted to swallow up the ducal house. And he was also a mad militarist. Wyan killed the emperor and seized the throne. No one could cope with his cruelty. Even within the palace walls, Harper lived in fear. Klein's tyranny eventually provoked a rebellion. As a result of this uprising, he died, and Harper asked how this happened. And suddenly, she thought that she didn't care anymore. She herself would soon die. The sister looked at her and addressed her by name. Pressing her hand to Harper's chest, she said that she could kill her. Suddenly, Callista said that she had one question. In her final letter to her sister, Harper described the crown prince's strategy, the size of his troops, and even indicated a secret escape route. Callista asked why she helped her. The reason was that the empire needed her sister. When she became duchess, the house and family flourished as never before, and the people adored her. Callista, in return, sincerely cared for them. She was supposed to become a good empress. Under her rule, even an empire destroyed by war will quickly recover. The only person she truly hated was probably Harper. Once she left the duchy, she had nowhere to go. If she hadn't met Prince Klein 4 years ago and left, perhaps this war could have been avoided. But Harper wanted to live. If she and her sister cannot exist side by side, then it is only natural that she will die at her hand. This war will only truly end when Harper is dead. She asked Callista if it mattered why she was doing it, and she replied that it didn't matter to her. She took out her sword and said goodbye to her sister. Callista ended Harper's life instantly and painlessly, perhaps the first and last act of mercy on her part. Suddenly, Harper heard someone calling her and asked them to leave the deceased alone. Suddenly, she realized that it was some familiar voice. The frightened maid Jenna asked if she was feeling well, but she had married and left the duchy 5 years ago. It was unclear why she was now next to Harper again, and she even thought that the girl had died too. The maid put her hand to her forehead, deciding that she had a fever, and that was why she was saying some strange things. But Harper seemed fine, and Jenna's touch felt very real. Suddenly, the girl saw herself in the mirror, but she couldn't believe what she saw there. In the reflection, she was still just a child. Jenna reminded that she turned 8 years old 3 days ago. Harper couldn't believe what she heard. The maid decided that the girl did not remember her age because only 3 days had passed. After all this suffering, Harper finally managed to die. But now she is alive again. It seems like she went back 10 years. Having received the title of Crown Princess, she became a puppet of the tyrant Klein, and in the end, she dies at the hands of her sister. Now she is a little girl again and has gone back 10 years. Even the emperor himself did not dare to touch the house of the Duke of Lupern. There were 2 heirs there. The first, Callista Lupern, is the daughter of the Duke's first marriage to Lucille Litra. Callista not only possessed dazzling beauty, but also shone in battle and in her studies, and her magical abilities were a gift of nature itself. But the Duke, who divorced Lucille, could not stand Callista. She reminded him too much of his ex-wife. And Harper was the fruit of a drunken night between the Duke and a maid, and that's how she was born. Everyone asked the Duke to reconsider his decision, as this had never happened before in the history of the House of Lupern. No one has ever recognized a bastard born to a servant as a legitimate heir. The Duke looked at the baby in silence, and she looked at him in response with sky-blue eyes. Looking at her, he couldn't help but smile. Then the idea came to him to marry her mother. It may have looked to everyone then as if the Duke, full of nobility, had married the maid for the sake of the child. But that was not the case at all. Harper was the spitting image of her illegitimate mother. That's why she was never a daughter to the Duke. He just wanted to buy time until he could get a new proper heir. Callista kept a tight rein on Harper, seeing her as a threat. The girl fought for her life with all her might. When she had already given up, life gave her a second chance. But suddenly, Harper thought that she might be killed a second time. In a past life, my father fell. The elders gathered around the girl and declared that it was she whom the Duke considered the true heir. And this became the perfect excuse for Kleinfelter to sink his claws into the duchy. And then it all ended with death at the hands of his sister. Harper really didn't want to die like that a second time. The world around her was so beautiful, but in her past life, she didn't even get a chance to enjoy it. Jenna reminded the girl that it was already lunchtime. Harper tried to remember how she had even survived in this house. Because the memories were somewhat vague, she had to act gradually. At this time, Callista had to be busy with her studies at the academy, and her father did not have time to notice his youngest daughter. Harper decided to eat the lunch the maid brought her, even though she thought she would refuse, as always. But as soon as she took one spoon, a real nightmare happened. Jenna started screaming so that she would probably spit it out. If Jenna had known that the girl was hungry, she would have brought her some normal food. Now Harper remembered everything. She was an heir only in name. Her father never favored her and never fed her properly. She made do with the stolen crusts that Jenna secretly brought her. The girl ate like an animal, but she didn't want to live like that anymore. Harper asked the maid to call the head chef, but she said that it was not worth doing. But the cook would hardly have followed the maid's call. Taking the moldy bread with her, the girl went to the kitchen herself. Now there was an abundance of all kinds of sweets in front of her. She was eating a triple chocolate muffin. Harper wanted Jenna to try it too. In her past life, the girl thought that Callista was tormenting her simply because she hated her. But now she understood everything. That former sister would have drawn her claws without hesitation. But stealthy revenge was not at all like her. So someone else was to blame, and Harper asked the servants to call the head chef. As expected, the kitchen was bursting with food and produce. The head chef of the ducal house was a respected figure. It was the height of rudeness to ask for information in the kitchen while he was working, but Harper demanded to speak to him in person. Hearing the noise in the kitchen, the main culprit appeared and replaced the girl's food. Leroy Brown was the head chef of the Lupern house and a distant relative of his father's third wife, Clarissa. To pay off his gambling debts, he quietly stole the Duke's money. He didn't do this by slipping Harper spoiled food. And now the girl started demanding normal food from him. But he began to say that this bread should be like this, calling it a signature dish with a green core. If the girl still doesn't know this, she will be considered ignorant. But considering the girl's mother, the head chef was not surprised that she behaved this way. Even though the girl was treated like a shadow, she still remained the Duke's legitimate daughter. Her mother died, but she continued to hold the title of Duchess until the end. And now some pathetic servant dared to insult her to the girl's face. Leroy began to say that even the emperor praised his masterpiece, and he told the girl not to bother him with such trifles anymore, and to sit quietly in her room. After all, no matter what she does, her bread will still not change. But Harper decided she'd had enough now. Suddenly, one of the maids asked us not to get in the way. Her face seemed very familiar to Harper. The girl remembered that this woman was the personal servant of Clarissa, the very second wife who had abused her. Harper smelled something delicious coming from somewhere, and the maid's cart contained all sorts of desserts and tea. Harper seemed to accidentally push the cart, and the decanter of water fell to the floor. And while the maid was distracted, she took the sweets for herself, and in their place she put moldy bread. But now it seems the time has come. The maid told Clarissa everything, and she came to Harper's room. Clarissa Lupern arrived accompanied by the head cook and her maid. She was very unhappy that the girl dared to spoil her food, but Jenna decided to protect the baby. Clarissa ordered her to remain silent, saying that soon she too would be held accountable to the fullest extent. She told her maid, Salia, to repeat again everything she had told her. She claimed that the young lady had deliberately touched Madame's food. Harper noticed a fresh abrasion on the maid's cheek. She guessed that Clarissa had raised her hand because of the bread, and her disposition had not changed at all. But Harper has been eating this kind of food all her life. Suddenly, Clarissa said that she would personally take care of her upbringing and ordered her to be taken out of the room. Jenna tried to stop her, but Leroy didn't let her do anything. For the fact that the girl touched the food without permission, Clarissa wanted to send her into confinement for several days. Harper remembered that she had intimidated her like this before. At first, the girl thought that she was mocking her to please Callista. Well, a couple of years later, Clarissa teamed up with her father's younger brother and tried to kill her sister, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Of course, the assassination attempt failed, and Callista, as the Duchess, repaid her in full. Harper was no longer afraid of those who had died so pitifully, so she asked what she had done wrong. Clarissa considered it a crime that the girl slipped this crap into her food, but then Harper said that the chef said that it was a rare delicacy that even the emperor loved. And since the girl was only 8 years old, she decided to innocently say that she had replaced the cheap white bread with this exquisite one, because she was more worthy of it. Clarissa thought about these words. Harper remembered her habit of blinking rapidly when she was confused. Leroy started shouting that it was a lie. He would never have allowed something like that to end up on Madame's table. Harper began to assure her that everyone in the kitchen heard the cook's words, and that she herself received such bread every day. But if that was the case, then all suspicion fell on Jenna. It turned out that she dared to steal food from her mistress for her own benefit. Clarissa was going to search the room immediately. If they find anything suspicious, or a coin of unknown origin, Jenna will be thrown out half dead. But if Harper admits his guilt and asks for forgiveness, then this time, Clarissa will show generosity and turn a blind eye to everything. But there will still be punishment for lying. And the girl happily agreed. Jenna and Leroy were amazed. Clarissa asked to repeat these words again. Harper repeated and reminded her that she wanted to find the real thief. But she set it up so that they would search not only Jenna, but also Leroy. After all, it was unclear whether it all started in the kitchen, or when the food has already reached the maid's hands. Clarissa heard servants crowding around the door. It was better to finish this quickly. She started shouting that she was the owner of the house, and that the girl could not interfere with the search at her own discretion. But Harper reminded that the right to decide whether a servant was to blame did not belong to the mistress of the house. That right belonged to the steward, Theon, and not to Clarissa. She said with irritation that she had indeed missed something in the girl's upbringing. But Harper reminded that it was the manager who was raising her. Clarissa had already raised her hand to hit the girl. But at that moment, someone stopped her. It was Theon, and he confirmed that the young lady had spoken the truth. Everyone knew about the youngest manager in the Lupern house, an accountant who brought the family's finances into order within a year. People called him a cold and calculating perfectionist, and he personally decided to lead the search. Clarissa pulled her hand back with great irritation. Harper had never seen her so distraught. Clarissa's title as mistress of the house was only nominal. Theon made the real decisions, especially when his father and Callista were away. Even in his past life, his sister immediately recognized his talent and drew him closer to her. But for now, he has not yet taken the oath of allegiance to her. Harper remembered that Theon had previously treated her like a true aristocrat and hadn't caused her any problems, so she still had a chance. She didn't even need his devotion. The girl wanted the manager to help her once. Theon reminded those present that the Duke had delegated to him the authority to discipline the staff and conduct searches. And since the majority was inclined to investigate, he decided to start by calling the necessary people. Theon reached for the rope, but nothing happened. Harper informed him that they could not be called from this room. Even a genius couldn't predict how the girl lived in such conditions, because no matter how much you called her, no one would come. That's why Jenna was always the one running after everyone. Then the manager touched the brooch on the lapel of his jacket. The brooch had a tracking function, and knights immediately entered the door. The manager ordered them to search Jenna and Leroy's rooms, and if they found any suspicious valuables or accounting books, to bring them back. The knights reported that they had searched everything, but could not find anything. Harper realized that the head chef was good at cleaning up traces, but the girl was no pushover when it came to telling the truth. And suddenly, Theon ordered a check of all the places in the mansion where these two were often, the servants' rooms and the kitchen utility rooms. Hearing this, Clarissa jumped up and began to say that this was too much for a child's imagination. It was necessary to simply punish the girl and her servants. But Harper reminded her that they didn't yet know exactly who was lying. The girl decided to ask the manager whether the old tower on the western side was part of the estate. Hearing this, Leroy was very tense. Theon confirmed that the dilapidated outbuilding on the outskirts was technically part of the Duke's estate. But it has been closed for a long time, and no one goes there, so there is no point in conducting a search there. And then Harper said that Jenna often walks nearby. Although it was not true, the girl had to use her name for a short time. If the decision was yours, then everyone should have been under suspicion. Well, those aren't the kind of words a little kid would usually say. It was a quote from Theon's graduation thesis. When Klein locked Harper in the palace, the only place she could go was the old library, and she read Theon's books over and over again. Now she called the manager for a reason. Harper knew him better than anyone in the house. Leroy could not stand it and began shouting that the searches in the Western Tower were a waste of time. Looking at his reaction, Theon realized that this might be the right track, and he ordered the knights to immediately search the Western Tower. The returning knights reported that they had found a box full of accounting books there. They recorded ingredient purchases, but the figures did not match those in the kitchen reports. The difference was converted into gold bars. Every signature in these books belonged to Leroy Brown. Harper breathed a sigh of relief, and now it was over. Now she was supposed to be stripped of her title and kicked out. That's how it was in her past life. Leroy began to assure Theon that all the records were forged, but he had seen enough. Now he had to pay with his head for what he had done. Harper was horrified by what she heard, as this was not part of her plan. The kitchen assistant also admitted that on the chef's orders, he sent the girl moldy bread instead of normal food. And this had been going on for more than 1 year. Embezzling the ducal family's property was a grave crime, but serving such rubbish to a young lady was a crime of a different magnitude. Leroy was lucky that nothing irreparable happened to her. He begged Clarissa for help, but she turned away and did not look in his direction. Even if the cook had someone to rely on, he had to know his place. Theon's only regret was that the steward did not have the authority to execute the servant. He ordered the confiscation of Leroy's property, the breaking of both his arms, and his expulsion from the territory of the duchy. As severance pay, he was given moldy bread. This all took longer than expected. When the Duke returned, Theon intended to give him a detailed report of the incident, so he advised Clarissa to prepare well. But suddenly, Harper tugged at his jacket sleeve. She asked Theon if he would agree not to tell his father if she asked. Harper explained that she didn't want to worry her father since everything was already resolved, but she didn't expect the manager to listen to her. But suddenly, Theon said that if she, as the injured party, insisted on this, then he would obey. Although he understood that the girl was not just being lenient for no reason, and she really wanted Clarissa to sincerely apologize for this incident, but not in front of Harper herself, but in front of Jenna. Clarissa couldn't believe she had to apologize to a pathetic servant. The maid began to explain that she was fine, but Harper was afraid that she could have been separated from Jenna forever if not for Theon. The manager could do nothing about the young lady's condition. Now the choice was Clarissa's. Either she apologizes or Theon reports everything to the Duke. His lordship valued Madame, so there might not have been any serious problems. But even the wisest could sometimes make a hasty decision. Clarissa couldn't understand how she ended up in this situation at all. Rumors have already started to circulate that the Duke found himself another woman during the trip. She couldn't afford to lose his favor over such nonsense. Clarissa apologized to Jenna, but decided to be more careful in the future to prevent something like this from happening. Jenna was shocked by what happened. Other servants also witnessed this event. But that's exactly what Harper wanted. Now, in the eyes of the servants, Jenna will be the same servant to whom the Duchess herself apologized. They will treat her carefully, because even Clarissa could not treat her rudely. Jenna's life will become easier. Now they will grow together in the eyes of others. Suddenly, Clarissa started shouting at the servants that this was not a performance. Theon also decided to take his leave, but remembered the lace. From now on, no one could dare not come to the young lady on call. He promised to see to this properly, but the girl simply couldn't reach him. He was too high. But Theon decided that Harper was simply shorter than the other young ladies, because she had not been properly nourished. These words hurt the girl a little, and the manager decided to tie an additional ribbon to it. But Harper had one more important request. Harper could now visit the library. Jenna gave the girl a bottle of water to take with her. Having had a delicious breakfast, the young lady was ready to move mountains. Now all that remained was to finish yesterday's business. The day before, Harper had asked Theon for permission to go to the Central Library, specifically the west wing of the 3rd floor. It was the place where all the knowledge of the Empire was kept. There were ancient treatises on magic, spells, rare maps, things that could not be found anywhere else. Harper was eager to get there to analyze the battlefield where Klein and Callista would clash. She developed a survival plan for herself. She had to find areas in the library that were not affected by the war and plan routes, steal valuable treasures from both families, and collect enough money. While Klein and Callista were at each other's throats, Harper had to escape to safety. Even now, this plan seemed flawless to her. All that remains is to obtain permission to visit the library. Visiting the library was not a problem, but the West Wing required knowledge of ancient languages, and Theon asked if Harper could read them. And the girl replied that of course she could, because in her past life she practically lived in the library. She was about to leave, but Jenna called out to her. The maid fell on her knees before her and said that yesterday she had done her a great service, because if Leroy had not been exposed, she would have been beaten and thrown out of the estate. But Harper reminded her that she had gone into the kitchen for her. Taking the girl's hands in hers, Jenna said she should have addressed this food issue sooner, but she was a coward and thought that she was doing enough for the young lady. But everything changed when the girl demanded that the Duchess apologize. Now, Jenna wanted to serve only Harper for the rest of her days. This oath was to remain unchanged. No one had ever said the oath of allegiance to a girl before. Jenna had been kind to her before, but there was always a distance between them. Harper was mired in her own misfortunes, and Jenna had no reason to risk anything for her. So she ended up marrying and leaving the duchy. But in this life, their relationship took a pleasant turn. Harper couldn't open the heavy door. She turned out to be too big for the child. The young lady did not give up, and the door began to give in to her. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Harper almost fell to the floor. But Theon managed to catch her, and said that for the first time, she was making a lot of noise. After all, it can be quiet in the library for a long time. Theon explained to the girl that half of the books on the third floor were very rare, and that one should not eat or drink near them. Suddenly, the manager started coughing violently. Harper asked if he was okay. Theon explained that he was fine, and that it was not an illness, and asked the girl to go up the stairs. Harper followed him to the third floor, but she saw that Theon's coughing did not stop. He coughed just as badly in his past life. Perhaps it was some hidden illness. But suddenly, the girl saw scars on his neck. This gave her some ideas, but she had to check everything. The girl called him, and he once again answered with irritation that it was not an illness and she should not worry. She decided to just not think about it anymore. Since she was allowed to use the library, there was no longer any need to meet with Theon. In any case, he will later become Callista's man, and one day receive the order to become a threat to Harper. The girl even thought about stopping trying so hard and just living peacefully. But now, they found themselves in the central library of Lupern. It was the first time the young lady had found herself in such a place. Of course, it couldn't compare with the Crown Prince's library. Apparently, Theon really was going to help her. But there was no time to admire the library. It was necessary to urgently find the right map. It should have been somewhere on this shelf. But suddenly, Harper felt a strange sensation. Her body began to move on its own, as if someone was pulling her. She found a book in her hands called Time and Magic, which meant that it had brought her here. They said that magic remains in old books and attracts those whose energy matches it. The girl discovered the myth of going back in time. Now there is a chance to find out why she came back to life. To go back in time, a treasure of truth was needed that transcended time and space. Although the treasure called Dragon Tears did exist, even if it were found, fulfilling all the conditions was incredibly difficult. Returning in time, memories of the past time were preserved, but soon they gradually disappeared. But Harper remembered everything that happened to her in her past life. Perhaps there was some other way. Suddenly, Theon appeared behind the girl and asked if she really thought she could read this book. Harper replied that it was simply written in complex language. But Theon looked at her strangely. Living in captivity, the girl never received a normal education and only learned to read in captivity with Klein. It was difficult at first, but then she learned to read even complex texts. But despite this, Klein considered her a non-entity and claimed that she would go down in history as the worst empress. The manager asked who taught her to read such texts and whether the girl went to some academy. Harper thought about how to answer her in a way that would sound convincing. She didn't want to answer every one of Theon's questions, and she said that she was Princess Lupern, and he should not interfere in her affairs. This answer puzzled Theon a little. Harper even thought that she had answered a little sharply, because he was also responsible for the Duchess. But Theon replied that her words made sense. The girl decided that it was better for her to leave before the situation got any worse, but she felt that the information in the book was incorrect. There was too much at odds with what she had experienced. She had no mana and no dragon tears either, and she told Theon that instead of books, she wanted to look at the map of the Empire. And now she had it in her hands. With this book, running away from home became more than just a dream. But as soon as I opened it, something incredible began to happen. Harper looked questioningly at Theon as he approached her. After thinking for a bit, he asked if the girl could read the Akas's map. But she couldn't. Due to the flow of mana on the continent, space would sometimes distort or fold, causing two distant regions to become connected. But if you use the Akas's map, you can determine the points of magical connection in advance. The map that displayed the flow of mana was a truly amazing invention, but it was no use if you couldn't read it, and Harper wanted Theon to teach her how to read it. But he warned her in advance that he would not teach her this. It should have taken the girl more than a month to study on her own. But Callista returned after a week. Theon doubted the young lady needed to know such things, but suddenly he burst into a fit of coughing again. Although he continued to assure that everything was fine with him, but Harper noticed that his cough was getting worse than before. The girl remembered the manager's words and decided that it was better for her not to interfere. As before, everything should have passed on its own. Harper thought that there was definitely nothing she could do to help here, but she was very worried about the spot on his neck. Harper asked if he had been poisoned by the yellow plant. It was also called the devil's herb. If you are poisoned by its venom, spots appear on the body, and a strong cough begins. Theon was surprised that the girl knew such information. In the past, she was also poisoned with this plant. Luckily, Harper had a maid from Carnay, with her at the time, who knew how to prepare an antidote, and the girl quickly began to recover. But she couldn't talk about it, and explained that she had simply read about it in a book. If things are left as they are, Theon will also be worse off, but Harper herself hasn't yet prepared this antidote. But after thinking a little, I took the risk of telling what I knew. She told Theon that many people believe that poisoning from this herb is incurable, but this is not true at all. The manager couldn't believe it, because he had consulted with all the doctors in the capital. Harper said that in Carnay, this herb is used as food. Theon assumed that some other kind of grass might have grown there, but that was not the case. The only difference was that in the Empire, they ate only the leaves and stems, while in Carnay, they also ate the bulbs. Thus, the root of this herb had a detoxifying effect. Theon's expression made it clear that he had understood everything correctly. He asked if the young lady would tell him where she learned about the antidote, but she shook her head. She was lucky, and the manager didn't bother her. And he only announced that in 2 days, at exactly 2 o'clock, their classes on reading magic cards would begin. This was wonderful news, and Harper promised not to be late. During the first lesson, Theon asked Harper to concentrate and look closely at the map. The first task was to find the fastest route from Venant to Lutins. Looking at the map, the girl decided that she needed to head from Venant to the lands of Rickon to find a portal in the southern forest leading to Ballard. The teacher gave her a little hint and told her that the matter was urgent and that 1,000 gold pieces were at stake. That amount definitely changed the situation, and Harper decided not to go into the forest, but to jump straight into the waterfall. The portal in it would immediately take her to Luton Beach. After all, when such a sum was at stake, what difference did it make whether you broke 2 legs or 1? Theon praised the girl for her success and ended the lesson. Harper laughed, because he said that such training would take a month, and she even thought that he just wanted to scare her. But then the girl noticed that Theon was not coughing. He really felt much better. He brewed the root as Harper said. She was very pleased that this method helped. Theon didn't much like the young lady calling him uncle. After all, he was not yet at the right age for such communication, since he and Callista were almost the same age. Harper had never really thought about how old Theon was. He always seemed like an adult to her. He asked to be called simply by his first name, as he would like to address the hostess of the house with his service. Jenna tried to wake the girl, but she wanted to sleep for at least 5 more minutes. But she didn't give her such an opportunity, reminding her what day it was. Lady Callista returned that day. The maid advised her to behave politely, not stand out, and keep the door shut. Even the hairstyle had to be simple. Today, Harper looked so simple that she could have been mistaken for a maid. The only thought that was going around in the girl's head was that her sister would soon arrive. And the more fussy the servants were, the more worried she became. Today, Harper had to blend in with the crowd and stay out of sight. And in the house, preparations were in full swing. The girl would have been better off hiding in the corner, as Jenna told her. Suddenly, someone appeared behind the girl and asked why she was idle when everyone was working. The girl turned around abruptly from the unexpectedness. It was Louis, a knight in training from the Third Order of Lupern. He said mockingly that in such sad clothes, he mistook her for a servant. Louis was Clarissa's nephew, and the girl was always afraid of him. But now he seemed to her just like an arrogant boy. Before, she would have simply tolerated his ridicule. And now she asked if the captain knew that he used a wooden sword outside of training. Harper promised that he would pay for everything he did to her before, and it was better for him to realize everything right now, because Callista was supposed to arrive soon. Otherwise, he behaved inappropriately for a future night. In anger, he pushed her down the stairs, and then he fell after her. When Harper wanted to get up, he asked why she pushed him. But suddenly, everyone became quiet, and the girl saw the reason. Callista, who had arrived, stood before her. For a moment, Harper hesitated. But then she pulled herself together, bowed as she had been taught, and apologized for blocking the way. And just as she wanted to greet Callista, someone pulled her away by the hand. It was Louis. He pushed the girl aside so that she would not get underfoot. And turning to Callista, he apologized for the fact that she had to see such a pitiful picture. The girl couldn't understand what kind of nonsense he was talking about. According to him, everything that happened was Harper's fault. Callista asked sternly what had happened to discipline in the Lupern household. Everyone around was silent. Then she asked Sawyer if it was really so difficult to teach a young knight at least basic manners. The commander of the knights said that it was his fault and asked to punish him. At that moment, Harper remembered the man. In her past life, she asked Klein to save Sawyer's life because he saved her life. When she was little, even against his orders, he continued to save. Now, Harper was glad to see Sawyer even in this state. Suddenly, Callista asked to bring her a wooden sword. If Louis was so self-confident, it meant he was at least capable of something. She ordered the knight to take up arms. If he defeats her, today's incident will be forgiven. The boy had thin arms, and there was hardly any strength in them, but he looked at Callistus with a grin. Then he turned to Clarissa and asked her to watch carefully. Louis raised his sword and vowed in front of everyone to throw the arrogant witch off her pedestal. He launched an attack before the fight even started. It wasn't confidence, it was just stupid audacity. He didn't even understand who he was dealing with. Callista's blow caused his sword to shatter into 2 pieces. Clarissa screamed in fright. Running up to the boy, she started shouting at Callista how she could do such a thing. Someone who swings a sword blindly had no place in the Lupern household, and Callista ordered Sawyer to take responsibility and leave with the boy. Harper couldn't believe that this meant the commander was leaving. And suddenly, she said loudly that it was all her fault. The girl said she spoke to Louis first and stopped him when he was about to leave. She apologized to Callista, saying that it was all her fault, and asked her not to kick Sawyer out. Suddenly, her sister called her by name and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. And then she said that the girls would never be able to escape from the name Lupern. Callista told Sawyer to take the baby and leave. Well, if something like this happens again, he won't leave here alive. The captain sincerely thanked the lady. Harper couldn't believe her sister had spared her. Her whole body was shaking with a fine tremor. Everything swam before her eyes, and the girl fainted. But perhaps Louis Evans shouldn't have been left alone. Aramis Miller, Callista's bodyguard, reminded her that it was the boy who had injured her arm as soon as she returned. Callista had heard the name before. His relatives were on the council and were eager to plant their weeds everywhere, and he was also related to the Duchess. Aramis suggested that if he was not stopped, he might return for revenge, and it would be wiser to get rid of him now. Callista hated dogs that bite the hand that feeds them. But suddenly, Theon entered the office. Aramis started shouting what he was doing there, but Callista called him. Miller quipped that he entered without knocking because his frail hands were not capable of anything. It was the lady who asked the manager to enter without knocking, and unlike the knight, he knew how to listen and remember. Callista asked Aramis to bring tea, but he didn't know how to do it at all, and said that it would be better to call the maid. But Callista replied that it didn't take much intelligence to pour boiling water over the tea leaves, and if he brings the tea cold, He will drink it himself." When they were alone, Callista told Theon that she had heard a strange rumor. She learned that he had taken Harper as an apprentice. The lady asked if the girl was really that talented. Theon could not yet answer this question definitively. Years ago, he'd said he wouldn't teach math to a dumbass like Aramis, and now he was breaking orders to keep Harper to himself. This meant that she really did have Lupern blood running through her, but Theon was sure that the little lady was not someone to be feared. Callista's offer to become her human still stood, and she waited for Theon to answer when he decided. He really thought about her words. "But I would like to be with a completely different person." Harper was woken up again by someone. The girl thought that it was Jenna who was keeping her from getting enough sleep again. But when I opened my eyes, I realized that it wasn't her at all. It was Vittori. She was greatly honored that the young lady recognized her. Vittori and Aramis were twins, he a fencing genius and she a medical genius. It was Callista Lupern's shield and sword. Vittori explained that the girl's fainting is not an illness. She is simply weak by nature and needs to eat well and sleep well. In response, Harper thanked her. If the girl felt strange again, Vittori said to call her immediately. Harper remembered fainting right onto her sister's shoulder. At that moment, Theon entered the room and said that sleeping late was a bad habit. Now you have to go to bed at 10 in the evening and get up at 7 in the morning. But Harper was very sleepy. Suddenly, she saw something strange on her feet. Theon explained that these were socks, so that she wouldn't freeze. He brought several pairs and asked her to change them regularly. Vittori told the manager about the girl's condition and that she needed to get stronger in order to bear greater responsibility in the future. She was the most competent doctor in the mansion. Unlike her brother, Theon trusted her. Theon thought that Vittori would soon become the court physician of the duchy, thanks to his own talent. That's what everyone around thought. But soon Vittori will commit suicide. Her death was the result of a struggle between the Council of Elders and Callista for the position of head of the family. The chairman of the council tried to weaken the influence of the Muller family by controlling Vittori for a long time with drugs. But his ambitious plan collapsed when Vittori took her own life for Callista, and by the time she found out about it, it was already too late. Harper recalled that it was then that her sister began attempting to kill her, as if she were the source of her problems. But if Vittori had not died then perhaps the girl would have managed to stop her and buy time to escape. Harper asked how many poison roots Theon had left. He had 7 roots, and the girl asked him to lend her 3. But Theon decided to give her everything. Harper also decided to visit the academy, and the manager replied that he would prepare everything for this. This time, the young lady decided to make sure to save Vittori so that they could pull each other out of this pit of suffering. The next day, Theon brought the root of a yellow-green herb. He also asked Harper to put on a hat. She was so confident when she left the house, but now she was confused by the sight of so many doors. Harper needed to find a medical research lab, but one door was different from the others, and the girl decided to go in. She quietly opened the door and said hello. There were a lot of books in the office, and not a speck of dust. Suddenly, Callista's voice was heard behind her, asking how Harper dared to enter here without permission. The girl certainly didn't expect to see her sister here. Aramis thought that a murderer had broken into the ladies' library, but it was only a young lady. But Callista believed that youth did not always mean innocence. Seeing the poisonous herb in the girl's hands, the sister asked whom she wanted to poison, but she screamed that she just wanted to hand it over to Vittori. Aramis explained that Vittori was on the 2nd floor. Callista decided that the girl was already thinking of a plan to get rid of the future royal doctor. Harper tried to explain to her sister that it wasn't poison. Callista forced the girl to eat the plant to test it on her. She squeezed the girl's face hard and she couldn't move. The sister noticed that just recently, Harper had been locked up and looking completely emaciated, and now she has plump cheeks. Now that Callista looked at the girl up close, she saw that her eyes were similar to their grandfather's. At this time, Vittori entered the library and asked in horror what Callista was doing with the young lady. Aramis began to say that they had caught the killer whose target was Vittori, and she replied that then the girl should have been taken immediately to the 2nd floor. Unable to bear it, Harper screamed that she didn't want to kill anyone and brought not poison, but medicine and a note from Theon. Vittori realized that this was the very plant that helped Theon recover. Callista was surprised that the manager's illness had receded, and Vittori is glad that the young lady is giving her such a valuable item. Harper replied that she was doing this because she loved Vittori very much, The girl was very touched by such recognition, and in gratitude for the gift, I decided to treat the girl to some super delicious cookies. Callista looked at what was happening with bewilderment. At this time, Clarissa was furiously washing the dishes. The maid warned her that she might harm herself, but this only made the Duchess even more angry. She was very angry that the young lady seemed to be mocking her by throwing out first Leroy and then Louis from the estate. Clarissa decided that she would not leave it like that. At this time, Autumn, the vice chairman of the Council of Elders, came to her. He was aware of what had happened, but asked the Duchess to calm down. But she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown after what Callista did to her nephew. Now she announced that the Evans family would be removed from the list of suppliers and would lose contracts. Urgent action was needed. Clarissa handed Osen a flask with unknown contents, and she asked that it be passed on to the chairman so that they could begin implementing the plan they had discussed. All this time, she did not sit idly by, and already began to implement it so that the Muller family would end up in her hands. Vittori and Harper were drinking tea. The girl had never tried this variety before. On the table, there were also those same cookies that Vittori was talking about, and it turned out to be much better than hot tea. Vittori remembered that Lady Callista was also partial to these cookies. She loved sweets very much, but lately she hardly ate them. It seemed like she didn't want to give people even the slightest reason to criticize her. There were still those on the council who disliked Callista. It was common knowledge that her mother and the council were in a tense relationship, which is why the girl still had not received the title of Viscount. But now something else was important to Harper. The young lady asked how the council felt about Vittori. After all, she will be sad if someone starts to offend someone she likes. Vittori reassured the young lady by saying that she had hardly had any meetings with the elders. It turned out that the council had not yet reached Vittori, and it was necessary to find out about this gradually. Harper asked her to conduct a study on the detoxifying effects of the yellow-green herb on her own, without anyone's help. After all, the girl could only trust her with this. Vittori promised to fulfill this request of the young lady. In reality, Harper was simply afraid that someone else would steal the research results. Time passed. There was little time left before Callista's graduation ball, and the girl needed to choose a dress for the banquet. But this time, the choice was much more difficult, because she had never had so many outfits. Harper told Theon that she had no outfits at all, and he allocated 120 million in cash for the matter, which was much more than usual. Jenna decided to dress Harper in a yellow dress, but the girl considered it the ugliest. But the maid decided to correct the mistake she had made earlier. And since the banquet would be decorated in gold tones, the young lady would not attract attention. Harper even wanted to not go to this banquet at all, but Jenna insisted that she should show herself. A guest from distant lands was to appear at this banquet. The chairman of the council invited the Natra family. They carried out all sorts of shady work for the chairman. In Harper's past life, the Naitra family only appeared at the Lupern ball once, when they set a trap for Vittori. Remembering this, the girl told Jenna that she needed to tell Theon something. The maid was supposed to help her and pass on the information to Theon before the banquet began. As the moose lived from the Duke's ball, everything was at the highest level. Exquisite music sounded in the hall, and there were handsome gentlemen all around. Some girls were crazy about the courageous knights. Others liked intelligent men like Sir Theon Arpin. Others believed that a worthless man should be able to control his body like Sir Aramis Miller with his fiery red hair. The debate about which of them was better caused a storm of emotions. Aramis listened to the ladies' arguments with ease and suddenly told Theon that he was taken. After all, 4 ladies said they liked him, but only 3 chose Theon. Theon didn't argue with him and decided to simply remain silent. Suddenly, Jenna came up to him and delivered a message from Harper. The young lady asked the manager to look after Vittori. Theon set about fulfilling her request. At the ball, everything was as Jenna said. No one cared about Harper at all. Seeing the treats, the girl realized that she was very hungry. She decided to sneak into the kitchen and have a snack. But a surprise awaited her in the kitchen, in the form of Callista. The star of the ball sat and ate cake with an unperturbed look. The sister asked the girl if she had come for the cake. When Callista saw Harper's outfit, she found it quite unusual, as she had never seen such a color before. And then she added that it was ugly and asked the girl not to wear it anymore. Callista offered Harper a piece of cake, thinking she would refuse. But the girl, shaking with fear, said that she would eat it, and she bit off a piece with pleasure. Callista decided it was too sweet, so she didn't serve it at the ball, but for Harper, sugar was just right for everyone. And suddenly they both said at the same time that the cake should be sweet. The girl was scared that she said this out loud in front of her sister. Suddenly, Callista took the plate of dessert from her sister's hands and told her to eat more slowly, and she began to feed her herself. Harper, not understanding what was happening, even thought that this was her last meal. Callista forbade the girl to go anywhere until the end of the ball. She explained this by saying that Harper is someone who is easily manipulated, and life under the control of old people is very unhappy. The girl couldn't remember if she had ever looked into her sister's eyes like that. And then I remembered that this had already happened once. This was before Callista killed her. She didn't understand what caused her sister's behavior, because she was sure that she hated her. Suddenly, an alarmed Theon ran into the kitchen. He reported that Vittori was missing. Callista decided that she might have gone to the academy, but Theon reported that the girl suddenly disappeared right in the middle of a dance with the second son of the Naitra family. The young lady assumed that Vittori would disappear only after 2 years. Theon began to guess that the girl might know about the disappearance. It turned out that she might know where she was. Harper asked the manager not to ask unnecessary questions, but to simply do as she said. Vittori lay unconscious on the floor in one of the rooms of the estate. After some time, she began to come to her senses. Well, she wasn't alone in this room. Ivan Naitra was with her, and he said that she now had a new master. As soon as Vittori left this room, she had to go to the Duchess and kiss her feet. But the girl had no intention of obeying them. But he explained that exactly an hour ago would have been the day since she last ate the Kori fruit. It was a devil fruit that would cause madness when it came to withdrawal if you were addicted to it, and soon she would feel like her body was being torn apart. The criminal ordered her to kneel and swear allegiance to the Duchess. He was already anticipating that the girl would soon have a seizure. But, to his great surprise, nothing happened to Vittori. She wanted to leave this room, but armed men stopped her. Ivan wasn't going to let her go just like that, even if the plan failed. After all, witnesses were not left alive, regardless of success. Suddenly, a piece of cake flew at his head. Ivan Naitra couldn't even understand who could have pulled off such a stunt. It was young Harper Lupern, and she ordered him to let Vittori go. No one could understand how she got here at all, because this place was sealed, and no one was supposed to enter here. She asked if Chairman Igart approved all of this. The girl was well aware of their plan. Ivan no longer had time for doubts and reflections, and he decided to kill Harper. He raised the dagger over the little girl, but suddenly, someone's sharp blade ran across his back. It was Callista, and she ordered the Nitri scum to move away from the child. Theon ran into the room after her. The girl was very glad that he had already arrived. After all, it was she who told Theon to take his sister and go straight to Riley's room. And since the Duke died, it had been sealed away. And Callista should have been able to easily overcome the barriers imposed there. And that reality easily broke this seal. The criminals greatly underestimated their opponents, but each of them was trained in the use of barriers and aura. Ivan already wanted to finish them both off, and didn't think that anyone would come to save them. At that moment, Aramis appeared from a crack in the wall. Seeing him, Ivan began to beg for mercy. But Aramis had no intention of doing that, and he didn't even listen to someone's pitiful whining. Harper found it all unbelievable. But Callista was not very pleased with the knight's behavior. She asked me not to rage like that indoors. But now my whole dress is covered in blood. And she was not talking about herself, but about Vittori. Then Callista looked at her sister. But suddenly, another criminal appeared behind her, his face hidden by a mask. Seeing this, Harper pushed her sister aside, and the criminal's aura struck the girl. The girl ended up in the hands of the villain. But Callista recognized his voice. It was Vice Chairman Osen. He knew the girl had good instincts. He wanted to kill Harper and put all the blame on his sister. Osen ordered Callista to remove her aura and step back. After escaping, he planned to throw the young lady off the cliff as well. Well, at that moment, a blade was thrust into the villain's back. Vittori Miller stood behind him. Osen had no idea that she could handle bladed weapons so well. The girl covered the dagger with red butterfly poison, and soon Osen was to fall into eternal sleep. Hearing these words, he fell to the floor unconscious. Vittori was very glad that she was able to help the little girl. Harper was also glad that everything was okay with her. But suddenly, the young lady felt herself beginning to fall. Callista managed to catch her. Harper couldn't understand why her sister had that expression on her face. They were all in Riley's room. The girl saw herself from the side, lying on the floor. But then she saw another crying girl, and suddenly she realized that it was also herself. Harper decided it was all a dream and pinched her cheek, but it didn't hurt. And then she remembered that in her past life, she really was covered in wounds. She was very busy running away from Callista, and thanks to this, she found a secret entrance to Riley's room. Little Harper reassured herself and promised that this time everything would be different. After some time, Callista summoned Theon. She asked how things were going with the vice chairman and Ivan Nitra. Theon said that they were still alive, but they were not speaking, as if they had been silencing spelled. Now it was necessary to interrogate the Duchess's maid, because she might also know something. But all this was done in the name of Osen. Callista ordered the elimination of Osen and the members of the Nitra family, and the rest to be left alone for now. Callista also learned that the herb Harper gave neutralized the poison in Vittori and cured Theon's cough. The manager was also surprised. Vittori had gotten used to his smell during her research. Callista began to suspect that it wasn't just a lucky coincidence that the girl ended up in Riley's room. After all, even she had to disarm a bunch of magical seals to get there, and Aramis gave up halfway and simply broke the wall. And Harper was already there before them. But Theon began to say that the girl sincerely believed that she had no magic. But if that were true, she wouldn't have been able to see Osen's invisible aura. She reacted to it faster than Callista and Aramis. Theon began to understand that Callista had guessed about Harper's abilities, and he urgently needed to divert attention from her. Callista tried to understand what she could have felt that would make her tell someone to bring her. She understood that her sister was afraid of her, but for some reason, she thought that she would risk everything to save her and Vittori. Harper tried to protect her sister, and she no longer understood anything. Callista asked to let her know when the girl woke up. At this time, the young lady was sleeping in her bed and gaining strength. When she woke up, she saw a bunch of services in the room. Harper asked Jenna to explain what was going on. And suddenly, Theon said that this was Lady Callista's order. She ordered that the second princess of the House of Lupern be provided with everything she might need. The most delicate cream soup and a steak of the most delicious meat were prepared especially for the girl. After trying the food, the girl realized that it was really very tasty. But suddenly, the Duchess burst into her room and began shouting at Theon and asking where he had put Celia. Seeing the mountain of gifts in Harper's room, she asked what it all meant. The girl was also given the Duchess's personal maid. She was shaking with anger, but the servants did not respond to the Duchess's orders. Harper's sister then entered the room and said that if the Duchess did not stop screaming, the services might go deaf. She asked everyone to leave so she could speak with the Duchess alone. Hearing this, Harper also hurried to leave, but Callista stopped her. The girl was the second princess of the Lupern house and the rightful mistress of this room, and if someone tries to kick her out, this does not mean that she needs to leave. Now, the Duchess was sure that all this was on Callista's orders, and said that she had raised her too softly. But Callista reminded that her mother was alive and well in the Ritra house, and the Duchess had no children of her own. Now, Clarissa started screaming because she took her maids. The Duchess reminded that she was still the head of this house. But then Callista said that she knew that she had conspired with the senior council. And recently a very dark story happened to Aramis's sister, and now he's downstairs talking to someone. Perhaps with exactly the one the Duchess is looking for. Now she realized that Celia was in their hands. Now anyone bearing the surname Evans will be expelled from the estate, and the Duke was not forbidden to enter Harper's room. She had better not interrupt the little lady's meal anymore. Otherwise, Callista promised to make sure that the rest of her maids disappeared as well. Callista said Harper had been through a lot, but she didn't understand what it all meant. New furniture, clothes, and maids were the price for saving Vittori. Harper's help was expensive, so Callista promised to repay her gradually. The girl remembered that her sister never liked to remain in debt, but now she was too generous. She even thought that she wanted to pay her off quickly and get rid of her forever. But suddenly someone knocked on the door. They were the knights of the Lupern family. Because of what happened at the banquet, Callista decided that the girl also needed a bodyguard and told her to choose one of them. The first candidate was Noel White of the Second Order of Knights, whose specialty was puppet shows. The second candidate played musical instruments well, and the third candidate promised to read her books at night. But if these three were not to her liking, then Callista offered her Sawyer. His main skill was knitting, and according to Callista, She personally recommends this candidate. After all, he was even ready to hand over the post of commander to a junior, just to protect Harper. The girl realized that his sister was impressed by the way he stopped Lewis's actions. Candidate number 5 was Zion Apencio. He had many younger brothers and sisters, and was used to taking care of children. Callista said that he had recently joined the First Knightly Order, was skilled, but was still having trouble adapting. The name Zion was very familiar to the girl. She remembered that in her past life she had seen him only once. Instead of shining in public, he was a master in the shadows. After leaving the Lipernian Order, he created the largest intelligence guild in the Empire. He became involved in a power struggle between the monarchs, buying and selling information, and was eventually eliminated by Callista and Klein. In the last moments, he managed to help his subordinates escape, sacrificing himself. The fact that he resisted for so long was admirable. It was difficult for the girl to make the right choice, but she still chose Zion. He knelt before her in gratitude and promised to watch over her faithfully throughout her life. Now it's time for lessons with Theon. Harper really didn't like it when he started calling her Señorita. The girl asked to call her as before, but he could not. He explained to Harper that many nobles would especially like to see him as their vassal, and when she grows up, she will understand how valuable it is to have him under her command. But the girl didn't care about this. She just wanted to escape from this house alive and well. But Theon had long legs, and he quickly caught up with her. He expected Harper wouldn't take it lightly, so he prepared some things. It was a get-rich project with Harper Lupern. He analyzed her habits and realized that money was more important to her than power, and drew up a business plan in her name. Now Harper understood why Klein had a constant headache, because of Theon in that life. He really was a genius. His business plan was simply amazing, and he once again suggested to Harper that she hand him over to the Señorita. She gave in and said that she would be happy to cooperate with him. His offer was too good to refuse. Harper pointed out one point of the plan to him and suggested using a different method at that point. He was very surprised and asked where she learned such things. A worthless crown prince taught her this. Harper had trouble opening one of the books. Theon gave it to her as homework. Callista saw the girl throw the book and said that if she did that, it would definitely not open. Callista took it in her hands herself. To open this book, mana was needed. Callista slammed the book down on the table with all her might. The book opened miraculously. The sister explained to Harper that it would be better to hit the book hard, but if that didn't work, then to ask her for help. At that moment, the girl thought that Callista was somewhat similar to the crown prince. At this time, the girl was studying genealogy. Theon told her that she should know everything about the royal family and aristocrats. Although this was an important quality for a lady, she had only managed to learn a little of it so far. Callista began to help her understand this difficult matter, and they began with Emperor Alric Favus Bayan and Empress Latania. On the next page, the girl saw a portrait of Crown Prince Klein Bayan. His words immediately came to mind, that she did not dare to set foot on the land that he had forbidden, and that she could only smile if he allowed her. She was to pretend to be dead if he ordered, and she would be buried where he allowed. Looking at his photo, Callista said that he was domineering and cruel, and it was better not to mess with him. The Empress was still sweeping up his dirty work, but sooner or later, he would still drive Harper into a corner. Many ladies fell in love with him because he was handsome. Next was a portrait of another face familiar to her. This was the second prince, whom the Empress hid and raised in secret, due to his poor health. This was Kilian Bayan. In his past life, he died at the age of 11, from the claws of a monster while hunting with Klein. Then Klein dealt with the monster at the cost of his eye, repeating the legend of the founder of the empire. Since then, he was nicknamed the Founder's Loyalty. With such support, it was obvious that he would inherit the imperial throne, and the second prince was no longer mentioned. Harper left home a few years after his death. If the second prince had not died then, it might have prevented Klein from becoming the crown prince. Although it is unlikely that the second prince could resist his brother without support, perhaps now another path and opportunity will open up to them. It was a dark night outside, and only one window of the castle had a light on. One of the maids sent there to see what the reason was. At such a late hour, the boy was reading books, and the maid asked why he was not sleeping. It was the second prince, Kilian Bayan. The nanny realized that he had become engrossed in reading again, although she had never heard of anyone learning martial arts from books. and she reminded him how the last time he studied magic alone, he almost died because of the mana reaction. But the boy had no other choice, because his mother did not allow him to hire teachers, and she constantly sent him medicine, protecting him from the world. And after taking these medications, he couldn't even move. And then the nanny said that she would secretly throw them out. But suddenly, Callion told the nanny that he would soon leave the palace. He knew that if the Empress found out about this, she would do everything to stop him. But that was why he left. She told him that he was born a bastard and should have died in childbirth along with his mother. But she took him under her guardianship. If this is true, then she will definitely try to find him, because that way he will get out of her control. The nanny asked what would happen if his mother sent knights after him, and the boy replied that he would return then, since he had nowhere to hide anyway. Well, then he will definitely know who his real enemy is. Vittori asked Harper if she had done all the homework Theon had given her, and she said that for 3 days they had been memorizing the genealogies of all the noble families. During this time, Vittori also prepared almost everything. She still has a couple more experiments to conduct, but most likely the medicine from the yellow-green herb will be ready soon. Harper was very glad that Vittori was helping her. The young lady remembered that the Asimor festival was about to begin, and she had probably been given a lot of chocolate. Asimor festival is a day to give sweets to special people. At this time, the inhabitants of the empire confess their feelings for each other, or they exchange homemade sweets with their neighbors and enjoy the holiday. Everyone except Harper. Theon believed that the lady's frequent fainting spells were most likely due to poor nutrition, so all her sweets were confiscated. Theon strictly forbade the servants to give the girl chocolate. Vittori was sure that everyone was eager to give the young lady homemade chocolate. Sion reminded that Theon had gone away on business for a few days, giving instructions to all the staff. But if Harper cooked it herself, it shouldn't be considered a violation, and she urgently called Sion to come with her to the kitchen. But new chef Chris said it would be impossible to make chocolate in this kitchen. Sion and Harper were surprised by the refusal, but Chris saw through the girl and knew that she would eat us all up at once. The young lady was not going to give up so easily and said that this chocolate was not for her. Harper said that the festival is coming soon and she wants to give everyone chocolate. The chef asked who she was going to give the chocolate to, and she replied, Jenna, the maids, Theon, Sion, and Callista. Hearing this, Chris was delighted and said that then she should hurry, and the temporary assistant who recently arrived will be very useful to her. He was covered in bruises, and the people in the kitchen thought he had been punished and thrown out. But as soon as he took the bandage off his arm, he started running around like crazy. Harper couldn't even believe who he was talking about. They had known this new assistant for a long time. But both were not happy about this meeting. Sion, upon seeing him, immediately rushed to meet him, and he pointed his sword at the boy. Sion considered that he was too rude to his mistress and ordered him to show respect for a long time while he counted to 3. Seeing this, Harper understood why even Callista recognized his skills. The assistant cook made a surprised face, but Sion knew very well how he treated the young lady. And after this, he still dared to appear at the estate. The guy started shouting that he had already been punished for that incident. But Sion was very serious and announced that time was up. Lewis was seriously scared. But after receiving blows from Sion, he had to repent before the young lady. After that, it was time to teach Harper how to make chocolate. Sion kept his eyes on Lewis, and now the girl understood what he meant when he said he was good with children. The young cook's assistant explained everything very well, and if even Callista spared him, then perhaps he really had changed. Harper accidentally spilled all the flour in the kitchen, but Lewis didn't scold her and simply said that he would clean it up later. Looking at this, the girl thought that he could really apologize. As it turned out, Lewis knew how to make different types of dessert chocolate, and it was impressive. He also praised the young lady, saying that she was doing well. But in reality, the only thing Harper did to make the chocolate was sprinkle flour. The girl asked Sion to step outside for a minute. Lewis was afraid that his words had ruined everything again. Harper told him to stop shaking and lying, and to pretend to be remorseful. Lewis looked at her with concern in his eyes, and yet he said honestly that the girl wasn't doing very well. And then he added that he still sincerely regretted it. His work in the kitchen was under Lady Callista's punishment, and it was then that he realized how terribly he had behaved, and he shouldn't have treated the young lady like that because of someone else's gossip. Kneeling before Harper, he apologized from the bottom of his heart. Sion returned unexpectedly, and the boy began to justify himself by saying that he did not expect forgiveness and wanted to thank Harper for intervening back then. It was the first time anyone had ever sincerely apologized to the young lady. In gratitude, Lewis decided to give the girl chocolate that he made himself. Harper couldn't help but reach for the dessert. "It's time to give chocolate." When the girl handed the bag to the maid, she thought that she wanted to grow plants, and she advised me to ask a gardener for normal fertilizer and not pick up all sorts of rubbish from the street. Harper screamed that it wasn't fertilizer, but chocolate that she had made herself. But as unpleasant as it was, Harper still understood why Jenna said that. Having unwrapped the bag, the girl realized that the chocolate really didn't look very good, but Jenna still wanted to try it. She was about to put the not-so-pretty piece in her mouth, but Harper decided to do something different, and she handed Jenna a beautiful box with a bow. When her maid opened it, she was amazed, because she had never seen such beautiful chocolate. It was the same chocolate that Lewis had made. Harper was going to give away hers, and then eat the one he had made for her. She still had a lot of chocolate left, so she decided that if she gave one away, it wouldn't hurt her. But this was a fatal mistake. The girl told everyone to take what they wanted, and everyone took Lewis's chocolate. Even Vittori, whom she trusted so much, did not choose her chocolate. In the end, all she had left were a few bags of her own chocolate. Now it was completely unclear why she had started all this. The girl was offended to the point of tears, and she didn't want to talk to anyone. But the maid announced that Lady Callista had come to see her. Harper immediately ran to her and asked what happened. The sister looked at the girl silently, and the young lady asked her what she wanted to know. Callista said she heard Chris tell her that Harper had made chocolate for her. The girl couldn't believe that Callista herself came for him. But suddenly, an awkward pause fell between them, and Callista asked if there was any chocolate. But Harper hastened to say that of course there was. But then she realized that all she had left were the little bags with her chocolate. The girl was very ashamed to give it to her sister, but she herself took the bag from Harper's hands, and holding it in her hands, she said thank you to the girl. This came as a complete surprise to the young lady. But since Lady Callista had received a gift, she had to thank her sister, and she handed her a box of treats. Callista reminded her sister that Theon was returning tomorrow, and she should go to bed early. As her sister left, Harper timidly thanked her. The girl was sure that there was chocolate in the box, and that if it was from Callista, Theon would not be able to take it. This means that her efforts were not in vain. When Harper bit into the chocolate, she saw a beautiful pendant inside. It looked expensive, and the girl was surprised that Callista had prepared it especially for her. But then I thought that most likely it was just a cheap trinket for children. At this time, Callista was about to drink tea, and at the same time I decided to try a treat from my sister. But suddenly, Aramis ran in, and seeing something incomprehensible in the mistress's hands, began shouting that it was dangerous. And then he knocked the chocolate out of Callista's hands. The candy flew far away, and the girl began to shake with anger. A cloud of aura appeared in her hands, and she shouted to Aramis that it was the chocolate that Harper had made for her. Aramis tried to justify himself, and said that anyone would have understood that it was poison. But Callista was very serious. She remembered that she and Aramis had not had a duel for a long time, and shouted for him to draw his sword. But he preferred to throw away his weapon. And he announced that the duel was over, and Master Callista had won. And if the lady wanted dessert, then Aramis or Vittori could bring it. But the girl said that she would eat it later. Aramis asked what the lady had been waiting for all day, and why she had eaten earlier. Callista asked what the concept of brother or sister meant to him. Aramis felt a little embarrassed, since it was not like her to ask such vague questions. For him, these were people who were not so easy to get rid of. Or, to put it simply, God's punishment. They are gentle with others, but they seem to tolerate you. They take things and don't return them. But as soon as you let down your guard, they will immediately stab you in the back. And then Callista revealed that she had given Harper expert's tears. This pendant was a memento from the Duke of Litra. He received it from his mother, a true family heirloom. This was the only thing Callista had that was suitable for a child. Aramis asked if she was sure of her decision, since she had recently said that keeping her distance was the best solution. Callista did not go back on her words, but she thought that if she had continued to ignore Harper, she might have lost even more. After all, without her sister, she would hardly have been able to save Vittori, and it is unknown how it would all have ended then. Callista felt as if the girl was protecting her with all these actions, But Aramis reminded her that Harper could have claimed her title, but Callista was sure she didn't need it. But others could try to use her, because with the two of them, the fight for the inheritance will not end. Callista's goal has always been to become the head of House Luperni. Aramis asked his mistress what could have changed. She herself didn't understand, but only for now. Theon was pleased with the contents of the clear flask. Harper, too, was convinced that such a thing was almost impossible to create. This medicine was especially effective against poisons that caused withdrawal symptoms. With it, they will finally be able to help people. Harper wanted to keep its ingredients a secret, but not sell it, but give it to people in need. They needed to reduce people's fear of the yellow-green grass. No one would take this antidote if they knew what it was made of. Keeping such a value to oneself was dangerous. The more profitable it became, the more people would try to get it. Theon's plan was to use the herb to gain an advantage in negotiations. But Lady Harper suggested an easier way to make money. The young lady decided to start buying land, the very one that connects the Empire and Carne, and in the future will become the main trade route. Now it was just a forest overgrown with thorns and was worth pennies. Carne, the origin of the yellow-green grass, is known for its steep, rocky mountains. And among these mountains, there is only one flat place, a forest of thorny bushes, between two cliffs, and cannibals lived there. Although if Harper wanted, she could get rid of both the thorns and the animals. She had even already figured out how to do it. Theon said that they only needed a little money to buy this forest. The girl couldn't believe that everything could go down the drain because of just one gold piece. But the seller expected payment today. Harper asked if she could get the palace's funding for the next month in advance, but Theon refused her this. She offered to borrow 1 gold coin from him, but he replied that a boss borrowing from a subordinate is the first step to corruption. The young lady began to think about who could lend her money, having a higher rank. She even thought about the Duchess, but there was one more person. And Harper came to her sister for help. The girl stood in the doorway of her office and did not know how to express her request. But if she was a member of the Lupernian clan, she should have been able to express her thoughts clearly. And then she asked Callista to lend her 1 gold coin. Harper promised to return everything next month, and even wanted to write an IOU or give collateral. Callista asked her why she needed the money, and she replied that she wanted to buy land. The sister understood perfectly well that it was impossible to buy land for 1 gold coin, and asked how much it cost in total. And Harper said that she needed 8 gold coins in total. Callista had the look of someone who wanted to explain something more clearly, and suddenly, the young lady told her about the business plan and offered her sister another option. She could simply invest with her. The princess began to study the papers that Harper and Theon had come up with. Having read up to the line about Callista's expected income, I was extremely surprised. But Harper confirmed that everything was written there correctly, and the income would be 10,000 gold per day. Callista thought seriously, and then I decided to ask Aramis a question. He saw the girl leave the mistress's office full of delight. Callista said that she gave her 1 gold coin, but not for pocket money. The plan that the young lady came up with seemed genuine to her, and she decided to participate, but Aramis felt that she had been led around by the nose. But Callista reminded him that he himself had said that in Igard, the elders would try to use Harper. At first she thought so too. Well, maybe this little girl is not one of those who can be used so easily. Harper walked down the road, unable to take her eyes off the documents on the ground. But then she still gave them to Theon, but her gaze fell on the upset Zion. The little girl asked him what was wrong. She promised to listen to him and help. Surely the future spymaster had some serious problem. Well, suddenly he said that it was a love problem. More precisely, it was unrequited love for a girl he met in the capital. Her name is Iris, and she is the daughter of the owner of the tavern where he used to work. The girl had a very unusual name, and she often said that she would one day rename the tavern in her honor. Harper had heard about Iris's tavern in her past life. It was the base of Zion's spy network, and the tavern owner Iris was his right hand. She received the message that because of Harper, Zion's fate had changed, and it was unclear what would happen to the future master of espionage. The girl started screaming for him to come to her immediately and confess his feelings, but he couldn't do that because he had to protect the young lady. And then she decided that she needed to go there too. Zion couldn't even imagine that she would do such a thing for him. Harper was sure that the young man would conquer Iris. She was determined to resolve this love problem beautifully. The maid asked Harper not to leave her knight, as the capital was too crowded. Theon gave Sion an artifact in case of emergency. It was imbued with rare and valuable magic and could be used if danger arose. The young lady was very happy about this trip. Much had changed since she had returned, but today was her first real trip outside the palace. In her previous life, she knew this city like the back of her hand, but after her reincarnation, she had never been there. Harper and Zion stood in the portal. No matter how many times the girl passed through this magical portal, she always had strange sensations. She turned to Zion to find out where the tavern was, but realized that something was wrong with the knight. He felt unwell because it was his first time using the portal. The nausea after teleportation was no joke. Harper also threw up right on Klein's head for the first time. Having come to their senses a little, they finally made it to Iris's tavern. But the young lady already knew that Zion would be rejected, and she even felt a little sorry for him. Harper said they would have to say goodbye briefly here, as children were not allowed in the tavern. But the knight was worried about how the girl might be left alone, and then he came up with a way out of the situation. He introduced her to his younger brother, Zane, and asked Harper to stay with him, at least for a little while, for her own safety. Zion headed to the tavern, but said he would be back soon. The girl wished him luck, but was sure that this conversation would drag on. After Iris's refusal, he will most likely stay in the tavern and soon realize that nothing spreads faster than rumors. Then he realizes how easy it is to turn other people's words to his advantage. All he has to do is settle there, like he did in his past life, and everything will move forward. Harper's plan will begin to come to fruition. She never thought that she would return to the imperial capital voluntarily. Suddenly, the girl saw something very interesting. It was a ribbon shop. Everything there was lace and beads, but one tape in particular caught Harper's attention. Looking at it, she thought that such a ribbon would suit her sister very well. But then I came to my senses and thought that I was talking nonsense. She urgently needed to pull herself together, because Callista was her enemy. Although still, that tape will look beautiful on her. And Harper made that purchase. She remembered Theon telling her that a good relationship with a business partner was very important. Zane asked if the young lady wanted to watch anything else. The girl began to look around, thinking where to go this time. And suddenly, her gaze stopped on one person. It was the commander of the Second Knightly Order of the Empire, Gale Osmond, the one who, in a past life, dragged Harper back to Klein when she tried to escape tyranny. It was unclear what he was doing there, but apparently he was looking for something. The girl was afraid that Klein had already started looking for her then. Realizing that something was wrong, Zane asked the young lady if she was feeling okay, but she told him to return to the tavern and tell Zion that she would be waiting for him in the alley nearby. The girl ran away as fast as she could, thinking that she needed to wait for Zion, but turning around, she saw that Gale's men were already nearby. Suddenly, Harper saw a place to hide. After all, it would never have occurred to anyone that one could hide in such a narrow crevice, although it turned out to be even more cramped there than she thought. Suddenly, the young lady saw a boy with frightened eyes. Looking at her, the stranger asked who she was. After apologizing, Harper pulled away from him, but she was interested in who this boy was. Throughout her life, the young girl had met many people, but this was the first time she had seen such a beautiful child. Particularly memorable were his dark green eyes, as if an entire forest was hidden in them. The boy began to ask who she was, but suddenly they heard footsteps very close to them. These people were one step away from them, but the children managed to remain unnoticed. Harper saw blood on her hand. She realized that the boy had a serious injury and needed to see a doctor immediately. In response, he timidly asked why she helped him hide from Gale's people. Harper asked how he knew him, and the boy said that he had escaped from the imperial palace. The Empire's knights only combed the alleys when someone escaped from Klein or the Empress's confinement, so they weren't after Harper but this boy. But outside the palace, no one knew him, and he had nowhere to go. The young lady began to assure him that she would help him. He just had to go home with her. He thanked her for the offer, but said that he would still have to go back. Harper began to tell him that escaping from the palace was not so easy. Did he really want to return now? But in the palace, there was a man who raised this boy, and he could be harmed, and he also recognized his enemies by sight. He was still just a child, but in his eyes there seemed to be echoes of the horror he had experienced. Perhaps he had been through a lot before deciding to escape, just like Harper once did. The girl told the fugitive that he needed to return without being caught by Gale's people, and she volunteered to accompany him. The boy decided to trust his new acquaintance and extended his hand to her. Harper showed him the shortest and safest route to the back wall of the imperial palace. Between the eastern and southern gates, there was a hole in the wall. The guards rarely noticed it, so it was possible to return unnoticed. The boy asked in surprise who she really was, and the girl introduced herself, saying that she was Harper Lupern. If he one day decides that he wants to run away, he can come to her. After all, now even outside the palace, there was someone who knew him, so now he was definitely not alone. Because now young Harper will think about him. Suddenly, she heard Zion's voice behind her. He was already running towards her as fast as he could. It was time for her to go, but she asked if the boy could manage on his own. But he was very determined, because now he had a friend like Harper. He corrected her to be careful. Smiling, she asked him the same thing in return. Harper told Zion to stop worrying and said she was fine. But from the night's state, Harper knew he had been rejected. For him, it was not a sexual experience. He and Iris had talked about a lot and got along well as colleagues. The girl realized that they were discussing the Intelligence Guild and was glad that everything was okay. But then she realized that something was wrong. Gale's men stood in front of them and said that just a minute ago there was no one here, and Zion and Harper looked very suspicious to them. Now they will have to go with them. Zion did not want to submit to them, but the girl stopped him, because if she revealed her identity now, she would attract unnecessary attention to both of them. And since the Intelligence Guild had not yet been created, getting involved in the affairs of the imperial family was a rash undertaking. Drawing his sword, Zion firmly said that he refused to follow them, and no one would take the young lady either. Gale's men chuckled and said it was not for him to decide, and the order was given to seize them. At that moment, Harper became very scared, but Zion entered into combat with them. Then he grabbed the young lady in his arms and ran, with Gale chasing after them. Suddenly, the girl remembered about the pendant and told Zion to use it. It began to glow with a bright light. The flash from it lit up the entire street. The pendant carried them to safety. But they weren't the only ones who came through the portal. Gale was also next to them and was very unhappy that they obeyed his order. He swore to kill them with his own hands, and so that they could not escape again, he took out his sword. But suddenly, everything around was illuminated by a red aura, and some force knocked the sword out of his hands. Gale couldn't understand what was happening. Aramis appeared next to Harper and told the said guest to look where he was. Gale recognized Aramis Muller with horror. He was once invited to the Royal Academy as a one-day special mentor and remembered very well what Aramis did to him. Now, Aramis remembered how 5 years ago some guy showed up and started putting on airs in front of the whole school, challenging everyone to a duel. He bragged that brats who hadn't yet finished their studies would never be able to beat him. But in the end, he got a beating. Gale started yelling at Aramis to shut up and stop telling this story. But now, for some reason, this man was waving a naked sword on Lupern territory. And on top of that, he got the child involved in this. Gale began to explain that the girl's behavior seemed suspicious to him, and he acted within the scope of his authority. After all, he is the commander of the Imperial Knights, appointed by the Emperor, and to resist him means to go against the will of the Emperor. But Aramis again asked him to look and understand where he was. After all, this was the Duchy of Lupern, and its mistress was Callista Lupern, and Gale dared to encroach on what was dear to her. Harper was astonished to hear these words. She couldn't believe there was anything in this world that Callista valued. Aramis sheathed his sword and engaged in hand-to-hand combat with Gale. Having received a blow from him, he fell to the ground. Gale screamed that it was a sneak attack, but Aramis considered that this man was not worthy of having his sword taken from its sheath. Gale began to ask Aramis to stop, but he ordered him to get out of the Lupern's house. Harper was shocked that Aramis simply threw him out, but suddenly he turned to the girl, and he said that the mistress was waiting for the young lady. Callista heard that an unpleasant incident had occurred in the castle, and sending Aramis there was the right decision. Callista asked if he had brought the enemy's sword. Taking the sword in her hands, the princess realized that it really belonged to Gale Osmond. Callista was unhappy that Zion left Harper in the city, but the girl stood up for him, and therefore they did not expel him, but later Sawyer still had to teach him a lesson. The young lady felt very uncomfortable that he got into trouble because of her. Callista asked everyone to leave the office, but Harper to stay. The girl was very afraid to be left alone with her, because seeing such a reserved person in anger was the worst thing that could happen. Callista leaned towards her sister and asked why she did that. After all, it is very dangerous for a child like her to wander alone without the accompaniment of a knight. She asked what had caused the girl to leave the bodyguard. Harper started saying that she really wanted to try walking alone because it was her first time out, and there were so many different interesting shops around. I told her that I bought a ribbon, and I really wanted to give it to my sister. Harper began frantically searching for where she had put it. Then she realized that she had lost it. She felt very awkward in front of Callista. I came to the Imperial City for the first time, but only suffered. And because of Gale, all the unpleasant memories from my past life came back to light. And this tape was the only warm memory. Harper couldn't hold back her tears of frustration. She couldn't control her emotions, but she didn't want Callista to see it. But her sister came up, wiped away her tears, and said that everything was fine. She didn't need the tape. It was enough that Harper thought about her. She came to the girl's place and asked her to calm down. That night, Harper couldn't sleep and kept thinking. She couldn't believe that Callista was comforting her. After all, she was the one who wanted to kill her with all determination. And now, it turned out that she was sincerely worried about her. If all this turned out to be true, it would be just wonderful. Meanwhile, completely different events were taking place in the Imperial Palace. The nanny couldn't believe her eyes. After all, the boy returned home again. She looked at his wound in horror, but he hastened to calm her down and said that he had simply fallen. The nanny decided that the knights had drawn their swords against him, and he said that Gale had attacked him without thinking. The nanny was about to go get some ointment, and the boy asked if Lupern was a common surname. The nanny replied that this was the name of the ducal house, and no one except members of this family could bear this surname. Then the prince realized that the girl was from a ducal family. Now, there was at least one person outside the estate who knew who he was, and for him, this was already enough. In the morning, passions were running high in the imperial palace. It was reported that Gale had indeed found the second prince, but he had been prevented by someone from the Lupern clan. This caused a whole storm of emotions. The first prince of the Klein Empire, Wyan, was not going to let them get away with this. He shouted for them to report to him about everything that happened there, and one of his knights said that Gale jumped into the portal. Somehow he found himself on the grounds of the Lupern estate and encountered Aramis. But it was hard to call it a duel. Osmond was completely routed. The prince began to shout, indignant that someone was interrupting him. It was Callista, and she held Gale's sword in her hands. She greeted Klein Vaillant. He started shouting who dared to let someone into the estate without his permission. The servants began to justify themselves by saying that they had reported this earlier. Callista noticed that he screamed at every incident, so she didn't hear anything. Klein asked how she dared to come here with a sword, but she explained that the sword was left behind by the commander of the knights of their territory. After all, if rumors about this incident spread, it would not benefit His Majesty. When they were alone, the prince began to talk about how the Empress was very angry, but because of the behavior of Callista's servant. But in response, Callista grabbed him by the chest. She had already warned him that his knights should not wander about just anywhere. She told him not to get into fights like a mad dog and warned him about what would happen if he was caught. Klein didn't understand why she cared who the Imperial Knights arrested within the capital. The prince did not understand what the problem was, because it was just a child and a knight. But this was not just any child, but a lady from the House of Lupern. Klein thought Gale was crazy to go against Callista, but she claimed that he went against her younger sister, Harper Lupern. He remembered that a girl had been born to a servant in the Lupern house, but one day she might be useful. Klein didn't understand what kind of title this little sister was. If this happens again, this sword will not be pierced into the floor, but into his flesh. The nanny wanted to tell Killian that the Empress and Marquise Lussac had arrived, but suddenly the Empress rudely pushed her away. The boy rushed to his nanny with a scream, but the Empress called out to him. Before him stood Empress Latania and Marquise Lussac, the Empress's relatives on her mother's side. She asked the boy to explain what this outrageous act meant. After all, he dared to disobey her order and go outside the palace. Perhaps he needed another spanking, like he had as a child? After all, in that very alley where he was hiding, Lupern's second daughter appeared, and his existence almost became known to the world. The Empress was sure that if the nobility found out who his real mother was, they would want to destroy him. Such was the fate of the traitorous degenerate. In the entire imperial palace, She was the only one who took care of him. The only noble family he can trust is the House of Lusaik. It was better for Killian to sit quietly and stay in the shadows. Gale told the Empress that the boy used a magical barrier to escape from the palace. He wasn't taught anything, and he didn't even know how to read properly, but he still ran away from the knights and used mana. And all this despite the fact that he was regularly given pills to suppress it. The Marquis was sure that even if he had escaped, no one would remember him anyway. But it was important for the Empress that this child was not seen either outside the palace or inside it. Killian was supposed to just exist, breathe, and be unharmed. He is merely a shadow meant to offset Klein's radiance, and that is what they have dedicated the last 11 years to. It looks like it's time to put the plan into action. Killian's death will become legend, but his life must be erased from everyone's memory. That is the meaning of his existence. Harper walked with her maid down the hallway of the estate. Suddenly, she saw Zion coming towards them. He greeted the young lady cheerfully. Noticing his good mood, the girl asked if it was connected with Iris, and he replied that Iris's confession was already in the past. He said that people are better off living in the present and looked at Jenna. Harper realized that a broken heart is best healed with new love. Adult relationships were very complicated. There was a pile of envelopes on Harper's desk. These were invitations to their family from the aristocracy, and Theon thought that Sion would be curious to read them. One of these invitations was from the Satil family, and upon hearing this, the knight became very interested in it. Harper told him what she had heard in a strange rumor when she was in the capital. They said that the northern Count Satil had an affair on the side. Despite the fact that he was married, he openly dated a famous opera singer. Zion asked if the young lady was sure that this was exactly how it happened. She asked Zion if he thought the Count wanted a divorce, but the knight doubted it. Zion considered these rumors to be lies. He was sure that most of these rumors were exaggerated. Count Satil was known for his passionate pursuit of his bride even before the wedding. It turned out that he himself had fanned these rumors, but Harper did not understand why he needed this. Zion explained that this was to hurt and provoke his wife, and all because she was the first to have a lover. Zion was indeed right. The young lady found it hard to believe that he was able to get to the truth only from rumors. The scandal with Count Satil was a hot topic even in her past life. When the Countess grew tired of family life and cheated on him, the Count, instead of making a scene, began a passionate affair with an opera singer. He wanted her to see that even such a prominent woman dreamed about her husband. As a result, the Countess returned to her husband 6 months later. But by that time, due to the scandal, the Count had already lost his entire fortune. This became known only a year later. Zion figured it all out so quickly that his insight should not be underestimated. Harper was delighted at how quickly he got to the truth with so little information. He suggested that she write to Iris, and he himself promised to find out everything in no time. After all, if it weren't for Harper, he would have decided to become a knight long ago. So now he was ready to find out everything that interested her. The girl was very grateful to him for this. Now she decided to turn to him for all the information she needed. The first question she wanted to know was if there were any Axtran addiction sufferers among the families who accepted the invitations. Zion asked again if she meant hallucinogenic drugs. Acetrin was a drug used in gambling houses to defraud wealthy customers. Those who take it suffer from hallucinations and loss of self-control. People who became addicted to it could not break free from the cycle of gambling, and in the end they lost all their wealth. According to Vittori's research, the yellow-green herb helped with the symptoms of this addiction. Zion thought about her words. There was indeed one person he suspected of being connected with Acetran. It was the lost Count Rostian. Harper guessed that this was the current Earl's father. At one point, he suddenly became addicted to gambling, passed on his title to his son, and almost ruined his family. The young lady was surprised at how much Zion knew, and she began to look for something in her bag. She handed the knight a cookie. It was a fee for information. Zion couldn't accept her cookies, but Harper revealed that these were the last cookies Jenna baked, and then Zion accepted this value as a gift. While he was enjoying the gift, Harper was pondering the information she had received from him, and she firmly decided that she would save Count Rostian's family. Meanwhile, there was a scandal in the Count's house. His son asked the Saruga to calm down. She could turn a blind eye to everything because of her father's illness. But she did not understand how it was possible to organize a banquet in their situation. But he simply couldn't do otherwise, because they needed money to pay off their debts. If my father hadn't become addicted to gambling, none of this would have happened. The former count was a born businessman who expanded the family silk business and amassed a huge fortune. But 3 years ago, succumbing to the temptation of an envious nobleman, the previous count became addicted to Akatran. He deprived a person of all self-control, and, having succumbed to addiction, the former count gambled away his entire fortune, passed on his title to his son, and fell ill. The count's wife was convinced that they simply had to close the business and quietly move to their estates when her brother inherited the title. Suddenly, the butler entered the office. He announced that guests had arrived. The count and countess went down to the guests. They saw Theon Arpin, a brilliant accountant who succeeded in everything he took on. But the count remembered that he didn't even listen when he begged him for help. Was he really interested in their business now? The count invited the butler Arpin to come in and discuss everything. And then Harper greeted them. The count and countess thought that it was Theon's daughter who had suddenly appeared. And then the young lady introduced herself to everyone. Butler Arpin confirmed that this is the youngest daughter of the Lupern family. The count decided that the girl was simply being capricious, wanting to see the banquet hall, and was skeptical about saving their family. The countess invited the girl to go upstairs and play with her son. But Harper replied that she didn't come to play, but to help them, and Theon confirmed that they had come to help their family. As proof, Harper pulled a bottle of medicine from her purse. The count and countess looked at each other in bewilderment. The count asked Theon what it was. The former Count Rostian was a talented businessman who achieved great success, but 3 years ago, he retired from business due to some illness. She said that she knew a way to cure the former count's illness. Hearing this, the count and countess were astonished. The girl asked if they really wanted her to go upstairs to play. Meanwhile, other events were taking place in the Imperial Palace. The nanny was cleaning Callion's room. It was good that everything ended this way. The boy understood that she knew many from noble families. She really heard a lot in her work. Callion asked her if there would be gatherings of nobles from the capital soon. The nanny replied that the Rostian family's banquet was coming soon, and Callion thought that the Lupern family might be there too. If that's the case, then Harper should be there too. And Callion also decided to go to this banquet. Hearing this, the nanny was horrified and told him that if he ran away again, he would be punished again. But he didn't run away. He walked, because he needed to meet someone, and he was just about to try out a new route. Callion walked over to his dresser, and opening it, he looked at the bow he had picked up. He firmly decided that this time he would come to her himself. A few days later, Count Rostian's banquet began. People were discussing how the atmosphere at their banquet last year was completely different. This was expected, since the Count's financial situation had worsened beyond recognition, and the current Count was not very knowledgeable about business. There were also rumors that the previous Count had become addicted to Acetran hallucinogens in the gambling house. This information was reported by the Intelligence Guild, and if this is true, then the Rostin family is doomed. At this time, Count and Countess Rostian appeared in the hall. They expressed gratitude to everyone who visited their estate. The Count reminded those present that in recent years he had managed the business of his father, who was ill, but now the time has come to relinquish control of the business and focus on managing the estate. Various conversations began to circulate among those gathered, but then the Count invited someone who would take over the management of their family's business. To everyone's surprise, it was the Count's father, the previous Count Rostian. The guests couldn't believe he was back. But a person dependent on Acetran hallucinogens could not walk so confidently. The Count heard that everyone was discussing the rumors circulating around him. But now the video of the state they are playing in has made many people think that these rumors were false. To everyone's surprise, the Count actually confirmed his addiction. But recently, one guest gave him some medicine. Suddenly, among the guests, he saw that very girl. He put his cane on the floor. Kneeling before Lady Lupern, the Count asked what the medicine was made of. The guests began to discuss young Lady Lupern. The previous Count began to tell that there were still many people like him in gambling houses. They are all poor souls who became addicted to drugs and lost their lives. The Count wanted to share this miracle cure with them. He wanted to pay a fortune for it, but Harper revealed that it was made from very inexpensive ingredients. Its main ingredient is yellow-green grass. Seeing the devil's grass, everyone started shouting for it to be removed. The previous Count was also surprised by the composition of this medicine. Theon confirmed the information. saying that the root of this herb has medicinal properties. Theon said that he had suffered for a long time from an illness caused by these petals, but now he was healthy. In front of everyone, he ate several roots of this herb. He no longer coughed or choked, all thanks to this herb. In addition, research has shown that it neutralizes 12 other poisons. But there were also those who wanted to make a fortune from this plant. The previous count knew that this plant grows only in the south of Karnay, and that to trade it, one would have to cross dangerous mountains. The count guessed that Harper had secured the supply route in advance, and so came to tell him. But his conclusions turned out to be wrong. Anyone could go to Karnay to take this herb. But Theon said that there was a shortcut that didn't require crossing the mountains. Between the mountains, there was a fairly wide plain, and its owner generously allowed its use. But a reasonable fee was charged for passage. The previous count urgently wanted to meet with the owner of this plain. The young lady approached the previous count and began to tug at his sleeve, and he asked her to wait while he talked about important matters. Harper Lupern announced that she was the owner of this land. Hearing this, the count was very surprised. The girl explained that she bought this land. Her sister Callista also participated in this. The count realized that they were not going to monopolize this route, but to charge a fee for the use of this route by several trading guilds. And the duty will be collected at the average rates accepted on the Empire's trade routes. Hearing this, everyone wanted to improve relations with the Lupern house. They even began to remind her how they once came to visit them when the young lady was still very little. Since the road was not yet fully developed, Harper wanted to give priority to the squad of monster hunters and lumberjacks. Those willing to take on this work immediately appeared. Theon appreciated how well the girl had done. The young lady was also pleased with the result. Now everything was almost ready. It all started with Vittori's research into the precise properties of the herb. Then came the creation of the necessary medicine. And now the thorny paths along the trade route will be cleared. Harper loved the flowers in the Earl's garden and wanted the same beauty in theirs. But suddenly she heard someone say that there were only cheap flowers in this garden. One of the boys who was walking in the garden told the Countess's son that the fountain was covered in dust and the flowers had withered, and he tried with all his might to protect his home and said that his mother had arranged this place with love. But the other children continued to make fun of him and said that he would be as useless as his father all his life. Harper witnessed this unpleasant situation and realized that the Count's son, Oscar, was at the center of the ridicule. The boy was shaking with anger. He couldn't bear it. He pulled out his toy dagger and ordered everyone to take their words back. And this only made the boys even more excited. And one of them took out his sword, and he ordered him to apologize. Only then would he be forgiven. Oscar's hands were shaking. He didn't want to be the first to apologize because he knew it wasn't his fault. And suddenly, someone's voice stood up for him. Suddenly, Harper appeared, and all attention was on her. But the boys didn't know who she was, and thought she was a hooligan. They started attacking her too, thinking that her family was also broke or that she liked Oscar. One of the girls was Jenna Rosette. Her mother ran the Rosette Guild. Also present in the garden were Elliot and Alvin Riedel, sons of Defense Riedel. In her responses, Harper also introduced herself to them, but she didn't want to say whose daughter she was because it wouldn't look very impressive. After all, there was only one person she was truly proud of. And then she said that she was Callista Lupern's sister. The children gathered were familiar with this surname, but suddenly they called her a fake lady. One of the boys called them the perfect couple with Oscar, calling him a fake and a beggar. The girl tried to convince him that the Rostian family business had been revived, but that Baron Riedel should now worry. After all, the former Count Rostian had regained his health. Baron Riedel wanted to take over the silk business, but as soon as the previous count returned, all the investors went to him. Jenna Rosette asked Harper if she was sure she had seen the old Earl. It turned out that Baron Riedel was in big trouble. One of his sons couldn't stand these words and ordered Harper to take his words back. But his sword couldn't do anything to her, because it was just a training sword with a spell cast on it. And even if he hits the girl with it, nothing will happen to her, and she considers his words to be false. Unable to bear such insolence, Riedel raised his sword over her. Harper closed her eyes, waiting for the blow. There was a strange sound, but no impact occurred. The girl opened her eyes and saw another boy in front of her. Turning to her, he asked if she was okay. Thank him, Harper said she was fine. And suddenly, she recognized him. It was the same boy she had met in the alley of the Imperial City, but she couldn't understand where he came from. Killian stood silently and looked at Harper. Alvin couldn't stand this attitude towards himself and started shouting that he was just a coward and had attacked him from behind. And then he challenged the stranger to a duel. Killian asked Harper if he scared her much, but the girl said that everything was fine. Killian seemed not to notice Alvin, and he rushed to attack. Seeing this, the young lady became very scared. Killian snatched the dagger from Oscar's hands in a flash. He accepted the challenge to a duel, and the battle began. The other children looked at what was happening in amazement. The sword and the dagger met in a duel. Killian was a master of blocking. But Alvin told his opponent not to get too cocky, as he had only blocked a couple of punches. Killian was very serious and had no intention of stopping. Harper looked at him in amazement. The other boys looked at all this in amazement. Killian ignored all the rules of combat and simply waved his dagger. But it was Alvin who was close to defeat. Brother supported Alvin as best he could. But before he could even come to his senses, the enemy went on the attack. Killian slashed his dagger across his opponent's face with all his might. Everyone gathered was horrified by what was happening. Alvin was shaken by pain and resentment. He fell to his knees and started screaming that his eye was damaged. Alvin can't believe he dared to harm him. But Killian told him to stop whining, because he hadn't really cut him. And besides, he was protected by a spell anyway. Killian sent the mana in such a way that the enemy would feel the blow, although the scar on Alvin's face would still remain. When Harper looked at this boy, she had a strange feeling. Her friend was walking towards her. The girl asked if everything was okay with him, and then he introduced himself to her as Killian. The name sounded surprisingly familiar to her, and then she realized that in front of her was the second prince, Killian Wyan. Harper couldn't believe it, because they said that the second prince was so sick and weak that the empress looked after him day and night. He was no match for the frail prince who could not appear in high society and died at his first hunting festival. And suddenly, she saw the scar on Alvin's face. It was exactly like Klein's scar. It reminded her of the time when Klein was wounded in the eye at the hunting festival. And the second time, the prince returned from there as a cold corpse. The empress testified that Klein was injured while protecting his frail younger brother from a demonic dragon. After her words, people suddenly began to warmly support Klein. It turned out that this was all a well-planned performance. Killian was not weak at all. He had a clear mind and outstanding fighting skills, but it was unclear why he fought Klein on the day of the hunt. But Killian, not yet mature, was unable to defeat his brother, and instead, he left a scar on Klein's face that will never disappear. Unlike Callista, Klein's position as crown prince was secure, and it was unclear why he would fight his own brother. But perhaps her concern was very feigned. The boy told Harper that it was time for him to go back. There is a commotion, and soon people will be gathering in the garden. Now the young lady understood many things. She guessed that the empress had forbidden Killian to show himself to people. The empress mourned his death in the war, but held no one accountable. Even the nobility didn't ask questions, because none of them knew Killian, and the enemy he spoke of was the empress. People were supposed to arrive soon at the sounds of the fight. Killian told Harper that it was time for him to go, but the young lady took his hand, and she asked not to leave, but just to stay next to her. She asked the boy not to listen to anyone and to trust only her. Logically, he shouldn't have listened to her, since they'd only seen each other twice. But for some reason, Harper was sure he'd trust her. Harper really wanted people to see it, and the boy decided to stay and be near her. Many people had already gathered in the garden. Baron Riedel was already there and asked his sons who dared to touch them, and one of the boys pointed at Killian. The Baron started shouting that he wouldn't get away with it, but suddenly he stopped short and fell silent. He saw Lady Lupin next to the unfamiliar boy, and they held hands tightly. The Baron was very confused. Harper knew perfectly well that now everyone wanted to sign a contract with her, because now she was not the fake that could be pushed around. Baron's son claimed the boy attacked first, but Harper said he threatened her first. Baron Riedel began to say that some kind of misunderstanding had occurred, and that Alvin was not the type to do such a thing. Then Harper decided to ask Lady Rosetta what had happened. At first she was embarrassed and silent, but then her mother came up to her and hugged her by the shoulders. I asked my daughter not to worry and to tell me everything honestly. She asked to explain whether the sweet and charming Lady Lupin had told the truth, or maybe the truth is on Baron Riedel's side. The girl thought for a second, and then, smiling, she said that Lady Lupin's words were the pure truth. She was just trying to help Oscar, And Alvin and Elliot mocked Oscar, calling him a beggar. Harper that the Baron's son mocked Oscar, insulting the Rostian family, and pointed a sword at her. This was terrible ingratitude, and the Baron was extremely dissatisfied with his son's behavior. Suddenly, Theon appeared and demanded an explanation. Otherwise, from today, they would live as enemies in the person of the house of the Duke of Lupern. Baron Riedel tried to pass it all off as a simple children's game, in which an unknown boy intervened. After all, even if it was an ordinary training sword, hitting someone in the eye with it would be very rude. People in the crowd started saying that this boy didn't have a very good upbringing. All this did not go unnoticed by the Marquise of Lusaica, and then Killian realized that he had been found. The Marquise was extremely surprised to see the boy in this garden. Baron Rostian could not imagine that the Marquise knew this boy. Callian stood silently before Marquis Lusaic, and then the Marquise asked the boy what he was doing there, addressing him as the second prince. These words came like a bolt from the blue. Baron Riedel asked again what the Marquis had named the boy. The crowd began to talk about the fact that it was indeed the second prince in front of them, since many knew that he was weak and did not leave the palace. The Marquis asked the boy again why he was here, and not in the imperial palace. Harper decided to answer him first and greeted the Marquise. The young lady explained that His Highness had come because she was in trouble, and had even won a duel with young Master Riedel. Marquis Lusaic couldn't believe that the second prince had taken part in a duel, and even won. He was sure that the Empress would never allow him to go outside. Killian and Harper held each other's hands tightly. She assured the Marquis that the prince had come here simply to talk to her, and it was she herself who begged him to come. Now everyone realized that the young Lady Lupern and the second prince had previously known each other. People began to gossip about how they had not learned about the second principle because it was rarely published, and they wanted to introduce it to their children. Now everyone considered him a noble and very brave young man. Suddenly, Count Rostian appeared. He was unhappy that while His Majesty and Lady Lupern were risking their lives, everyone was just sitting inside with folded hands. Seeing the girl, Oscar rushed towards him as fast as he could. The Count expressed his sincere gratitude to the second prince for helping his grandson. And then it was Baron Riedel's turn. The Count told him to take his children and leave this place immediately. Now the partnership proposal he put forward will never be accepted. From that day on, the Rostian house would never again offer them hospitality, and the Count was sure that the other guests shared his opinion. He asked to take the Baron out of the estate. Baron Riedel begged for mercy. Marquis Lusaic assumed that today's reception was over. He offered to escort second Prince Killian back to the palace, but he asked his uncle to wait because he wanted to finish the conversation with the young lady. The Marquis was very irritated by this situation. Clenching his fists in anger, he asked if the prince was afraid of the consequences, but he replied that it would not take long and he would return. Marquis Lusaic had no choice but to leave. Harper looked at Killian silently. She apologized to him, because perhaps she said too much. But this was the first time my uncle listened to him. The boy believed that Harper was indeed right, and he should have done all this earlier. And then he handed the girl a small paper bag. Killian was very glad to see Harper again. He said goodbye to her in the hope of seeing her again. Harper was overjoyed to see that the little bag contained that very ribbon. It was a real blessing that she was found. Theon knew Harper had many talents, but even he didn't know she could make such a unique friend. Beaming, Harper called the prince a truly dear friend, because he found what she had lost. Theon didn't quite understand the connection between friendship and the lost thing. It was time to return, and Theon wanted to report these events to Callista first, while Harper dreamed of giving the ribbon to her sister as soon as possible. But then the young lady took a closer look at the ribbon. She didn't even remember that she was so shiny and beautiful. But a few days before, painstaking work had been going on in Killian's room. He was making a blue bow out of ribbon. A meeting of the Council of Elders was underway at the Dupern estate. The Duke's family found it difficult to distribute Southern tea, so it made sense to transfer the business rights to another party in exchange for a fee. The chairman of the Council of Elders, Egard, insisted that they should transfer the rights to the business to the imperial family and the Marquise. The other elders agreed with him. Baroness Adelina was unhappy that she had already expressed her opinion, and they had to convene the meeting again. But Callista has already expressed her position. The imperial family could be considered, but the Marquis of Lusaic was excluded, since the family title did not count in business. The Baroness insisted that their political relationship be taken into account, but the Marquis's proposals were worse than those of Viscount Acidin. This was probably because they assumed that their offer would be accepted under any circumstances. The Baroness insisted that this was the way it was done, but Callista had her own opinion regarding the contract, which was causing losses to the family. She conducted business in a completely different way from the Duke. Well, the same could be said about the Baroness's older brother. He would probably prefer to burn such a contract than put a seal on it. Callista was very sorry that the previous generation left them so early. Of course, when his lordship finds out what happened here, he will be unhappy. But now he was not here. Thanks to some, he went on a pleasant journey, leaving a family mark. Since Callista got involved with the Mueller family, she has become increasingly hostile. Egard persuaded the Duke, who had not yet found a suitable heir, to go on a journey with a single woman. He didn't think that a girl who had just graduated from the academy would demand the family seal as a matter of course. Egard dreams of becoming the new representative of the Lupern house. A direct descendant would become a representative in the absence of the head of the family, but the princess takes her temporary position too seriously. After all, Callista is not yet the official heir to the ducal title. The council could not allow him to resolve such complex issues alone. This right belonged only to the official representative. She had not yet been granted the title of heir, and the council was still delaying the issue, and all because she was considered incompetent enough. But council officials believed that with its return, the area's security and administrative efficiency had improved significantly. Egard continued to say that she had done nothing on her own, although Callista herself did not see the logic in his words. Although they opposed every new business she tried to start in the name of part of the family. But this title could not be obtained just like that. The princess had to prove that she was worthy of him. Callista asked if they really believed they could protect Lupern's home if she were to suddenly step away from the department. Then Duke Litra will immediately start a war for their territories. Without her, he will have no reason to hold back. Callista asked Egard whether he himself would lead the troops with a sword in his hands. But he reminded that the second young lady was also a candidate for the post of head of the clan. But Callista sternly warned him not to dare use Harper for his own purposes. When she, without hiding behind the family name, starts a business and earns more than 100,000 in gold, then Egard will recognize her as the heir. Callista was very unhappy with this condition, but if she does not accept it, the council will not be able to support her in her rights as a representative. But suddenly, Harper appeared in the meeting room. She apologized, saying she was unaware that a meeting was taking place in the hall. The girl was looking for her sister, but said she could come back later. Egard chuckled, saying that both sisters were still young, and therefore probably not familiar with such etiquette. And he himself was sure that the 8-year-old child would say some nonsense and embarrass himself. Callista stood up and asked what brought Harper here. The sister heard that the young lady was at Count Rostian's estate. She assumed that something had happened during this visit. Harper thought she would be scolded for interrupting the meeting. The girl showed her sister the papers and said that she had come to tell her about the deal. It was the contract for the Carnet trade route she had spoken of earlier. The contract bore signatures from the Rosette Merchant Guild and Count Rostian's family, and she also received 6 months' advance payment. These words came like a bolt from the blue. This sum in total amounted to 800,000 in gold, and Callista's share was exactly 100,000 gold. The princess couldn't believe it. Harper did as she was told, but she didn't understand why everyone was looking at her like that. This sum was absolutely necessary for Callista, and she looked at the Council of Elders with the expression of a winner. Egard screamed, not understanding who had given them such a huge sum, and in general, he knew nothing about such a contract, but Callista reported that it was not signed with the family seal. The Baroness always knew that Callista was smart, but she couldn't imagine that she would take advantage of this trait so vilely. She decided that Callista had fabricated the whole thing using her younger sister. The princess asked her to stop talking nonsense. The Baroness snatched the documents from Harper's hands. She began to examine him, sure that something was wrong with him. The Baroness tried to find a trick in him, but since she was going to take the contract, Callista insisted that she read it out loud. As it turned out, according to the terms of the contract, Harper actually received 700,000 gold, and Callista 100,000. Turning to Egard, Callista said that now he would not take his words back. He addressed her as my lady, which made the princess laugh a lot. She pointed out that the head of the council cannot be unaware of the titles. Now turning to her, "Your lordship," Igard said that she could be free. Taking Harper's hand, they walked out of the hall together. As they walked down the corridor of the estate, the girl also addressed Callista, "Your Grace." Harper even thought that she might scold her for calling her sister earlier, but Callista, on the contrary, asked to call her sister from today on, and nothing else. Harper was very surprised by this decision. Callista was very grateful to her, and giving Harper those gold coins was the best decision she made. But then the girl said that she still had something, and she handed her sister the very same bow that she had lost in the city. It turned out that Harper had come all this way to give it to Callista as quickly as possible, and if she doesn't want to wear it like that, she can make a ribbon out of it. Suddenly, Callista hugged her sister with all her might. It was the best gift she ever received. The girl felt like her heart was about to jump out of her chest, because no one had ever hugged her like that before. This meant that her sister cared about her, and in response she hugged her too. The next day, Aramis came to Callista's office, but he couldn't look at her calmly. And then I decided to ask her if she was going to continue wearing this bow. He begged her to take off this decoration and ask the servants to help her with her hair. But Callista didn't want anyone to touch that bow. Then Aramis asked why she had hung it in front at all. This question made the princess very angry, and she said that he was an idiot, because if the bow was at the back, she would not see it. At the same time, in Harper's room, Theon was extremely displeased to see a huge box of chocolates, but the girl said that it was a gift from her sister. An invitation to a banquet arrived from the imperial palace, and Aramis could not believe that Callista would go there with that bow on her head. But that's exactly what the princess was going to do. But Aramis would not have seen it anyway, since he could not go with Callista due to the training of the knightly order. Suddenly, she said she was going to take Harper with her. Aramis was very unhappy with this, calling it some kind of friendly walk between two sisters. Callista was surprised that he saw it that way. She started screaming that they didn't look like friendly sisters at all. Harper was supposed to have a bow like hers. She even thought that they might look similar. In fact, they were not a bit alike, but were exact copies of their mothers. Callista thought for a moment about Aramis's words. She even liked his words about the sisters' friendly outing a little. A few days later, the two sisters arrived at the imperial palace. Callista asked if the little lady liked it here, but Aramis still couldn't come to terms with the fact that Callista's bow didn't hang. Harper was sure that the carriage would shake much more violently on the way, but her sister gently enveloped the carriage wheels with manna. It was a simple spell that Harper too should soon master. Some time ago, Callista told her sister to learn magic from Theon. Well, he replied that he didn't know how to use it, but he could teach Harper the theory. When her ladyship was younger, she sometimes turned to him for advice, but Harper believed that she had no mana. She had never used it in her past life. Klein thought she was hiding it and took her to magicians who experimented on her. He realized that the girl had no talent and said that someone weak like her would have been dead the moment he crossed the threshold of the palace. Moreover, only truly gifted children are capable of doing this on their own. For example, people like Callian. But Theon was confident that she would succeed. It couldn't be any other way, that's what Callista said. People of the Lupern house were born with hidden magical potential by nature. The current duke also possessed it in his youth, and approximately once every 2 generations, someone appears who inherits the highest level of mana. Harper was sure they were talking about Callista, but her ladyship did not inherit the Lupernian potential. Her energy was not unique. The girl was surprised that her sister had no potential. It turned out that all her strength was the result of hard work. All direct descendants of the ducal house of Litra were naturally intelligent and talented. The girl trained every day, but so far she had no success. But Callista reassured her, saying that even if a person is very talented, not everything works out the first time. Harper asked her sister how old she was when she felt her mana flow, and she replied that it happened at about 3 years old. Callista advised her to focus on her feelings, to try to explore those emotions that she had not experienced before. While they were talking, the carriage stopped. Callista was the first to emerge from it, and then she offered her hand to her younger sister. Harper didn't expect such a gesture from her, and then I was very happy to receive such attention from her, and she happily extended her hand to her. Before meeting with His Majesty, Harper decided to be alone and look at the palace garden. She needed to find clues about the relationship between Callian and the Empress, Perhaps rumors from the servants would help her with this. Until she could use magic, she would have to use her legs. Callian received another letter from Baron Riedel's house. The boy thought it was another tearful apology. The nanny suggested burning it, but Callian asked to put it in a prominent place with the other gifts. It was strange that the Empress did not take any action, because the prince became known to the whole world. Callian was sure that she wasn't sitting idle. She just hadn't had the opportunity to act. Previously, no one paid attention to this palace, but now they are watching it. If she mistreats the son she cherishes, everyone will see through her lies, and she has no choice but to leave him alone. She was probably furious, and it was impossible for additional security to be assigned for this reason. But she can no longer use Callian as her puppet. What was previously impossible to do alone changed thanks to Harper's help. The Imperial Palace was still dangerous, and there was no one there to protect Callian. But now he too had a chance to live like everyone else. Suddenly, the nanny saw something through the window. The prince asked if this was the lady he had mentioned. Callian walked to the window and looked down. Harper was indeed running across the yard. Emperor Alric Favus Wyan was dissatisfied with the prepared dessert, finding it too sweet. But Callista said that everything was fine and thanked her for the invitation. And then he congratulated her on becoming a young duchess, because recognition from the elders of the house is no small matter. The emperor heard that as soon as she received the title, she restored order both in the capital and in the territory of Lupern. It was really impressive, and he had also recently heard some interesting news about her younger sister. He learned that an 8-year-old young lady had invented a way to spread an addiction-curing herb throughout the empire. It was true, and Callista was grateful for the praise from His Majesty and promised to convey these words to her sister. The emperor noticed that half-siblings rarely got along so well. The empress screamed that this girl's family was plotting treason, and the emperor's mistress put him, the empress, and the entire imperial family at risk. Callista thought that His Majesty was not feeling well, but he replied that everything was fine. He had other things to do, so he excused himself and got ready to leave. But Callista decided to ask him something. Noticing that the duchess was the same age as the first prince, he thought she was aiming for marriage, but she only wanted to take the macarons. This request was very surprising for His Majesty. Callista wanted her sister to try this dessert. Meanwhile, Harper was a little lost and didn't know where she was, but she did not lose hope of finding out at least something. Suddenly, she remembered one important detail. Callian's eyes were a very rare color. She urgently needed to verify the information, and she hurried to the Imperial Library. She remembered well where she was, and it was not difficult to find her. Harper urgently wanted to look through the Emperor's family tree, and she found what she was looking for. It was the second son of Baron Eliad. He had a daughter who, during her lifetime, served as a maid of honor to Alric Vayan on the recommendation of the Empress. Exactly 4 days after the birth of the second prince, the entire family was executed for treason. It turned out that the Empress was not Callian's real mother. His biological mother was a servant from the Iliad family. But it is unclear why Her Majesty declared Callian her son and raised him, because she already had Klein. But then Harper remembered the founding legend, where the hero lost his brother to the Dragon of Disaster. The girl guessed that the Empress was looking for a sacrifice in order to give her son greater power than any emperor. Now she knew for sure that Callian was in danger. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out and asked why she was walking through the imperial garden without permission. This man asked which house she was from. His hair was jet black, and his eyebrows were dark, and his eyes were filled with an inexplicable anger. And the current Klein also had both eyes intact. Looking at the girl more closely, he remembered that she was from the Lupern house. Harper greeted the crown prince, but he was not pleased that she did not do so immediately. Harper apologized for this, but he said that these were just words. If she made a mistake, she should get on her knees. He ordered the girl to kneel and bow so that her forehead touched the floor, and she also had to fold her hands and ask him for forgiveness. But Harper wouldn't agree to do that. But suddenly, he said that the girl behaved just like her sister, but Harper would not dare to rebel, not knowing his place, unlike Callista. In his opinion, Callista acted like the center of the universe. He thought about teaching her a lesson one day, but instead, he met her younger sister. The horror of her past life came flooding back to Harper's mind, and the image of the sister in armor and with a sharp sword in her hands. Now the girl felt a thrill in her chest, but it wasn't fever. She felt anger filling her mind. She was furious. She had never experienced this before in her life. Suddenly, a huge dragon statue appeared behind Harper. Klein couldn't understand what was happening. The girl realized that this was not an accident. She was sure that some kind of power had awakened within her. Klein was able to break the statue, but he did not understand why it appeared at such a time. But suddenly, he turned to the young lady, and swinging his sword, he shouted that he would personally teach her a lesson. He didn't see Callista appear next to him, holding her brooch in her hands. Throwing her jewelry, she hit the crown prince's weapon right on target. This finally drove him crazy. Callista ordered him to lower his sword, or her next target would be his left eye. Seeing her sister, the girl ran to her. Klein threatened the young duchess, telling her not to think that after this everything would be all right with her. Harper was very scared for her sister, but Callista was confident that everything would be fine with her, and she asked Klein to take his disgusting face away from the girl. In response, the crown prince swung his sword at Callista. All the horrors of her past life came flooding back to Harper's mind, and she screamed at the top of her lungs for him not to touch her. She awakened her mana, and it struck the ground. Her force threw Klein several meters and slammed him into the fence. Callista felt mana vibrate. Harper told her sister that she did it. The Empress ran at the noise and rushed towards Klein. The sisters recognized her. It was Empress Latania. But she wasn't the only one who came running to the noise. Harper saw Callian being held by the Imperial Guards.